England. Highs here are 23, possibly even 24 Celsius. That's into the mid-70s in Fahrenheit. Always a bit cooler though towards the northwest given that cloud and rain. The band of cloud and rain edges further south into England and Wales as we go into Monday. To the south of that, brighter skies, 1 or 2 showers and much brighter weather, but turning cooler too across the north of Scotland, with highs up to 19 or 20 Celsius across the south of the UK, nearer the low to mid-teens further north. Generally turning more unsettled and cooler during the week ahead though.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join me, Camila Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of June. Today, the Battle Bus campaign gets underway as Rishi Sunak faces another poll blow. while Sir Keir Starmer is set to tackle the tricky problem of immigration.
It's 30 years since the RAF Chinook helicopter crash in the Mull of Kintyre, as the families of the victims still search for answers about what actually happened.
So there is no doubt there was something wrong with the craft.
Continue our series of D-Day veterans as we run up to the 80th anniversary of the historic landings later this week. Today, Will Hollis speaks to 98-year-old Alec Penstone.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in.
David Beckham and the King have joined forces as they bond over bees.
Good morning. It was Real Madrid who once again triumphed in the Champions League final as their 2-0 win over Borussia Dortmund gave them a record-extending 15th title. But there was another worrying security breach at Wembley. More on that later. Elsewhere, the boxing saw a one-sided 5 versus 5 in Saudi, while in tennis, Novak Djokovic left it late to prevail in Paris.
Well, there's going to be plenty of warm sunshine across the country today, though a little bit cloudier across the northwest with some rain and drizzle, and a bit cooler here too. So stay tuned for all your latest weather updates.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Some good news for men of a certain age today.
Ooh.
Because we're all about to become fashionable. Partly thanks to Gareth Southgate.
The cardigan.
Because the cardigan is back. Gareth Southgate is in the Daily Star and he's on some fancy magazines. The GQ fashion magazine. Should you be?
Gareth Southgate.
And Gareth Southgate is wearing cardigans. And apparently woolly knits are the way forward, and he's going to be wearing more short-sleeved knits than he does suit and tie.
Short-sleeved knits.
And apparently that's to relate to younger players. Apparently younger players are wearing knits.
I like a man in a cardi.
So there you go.
Nice.
Well, there you go. So we're all going a bit grandad, and cardigans are in.
I like that. I think that's great. I mean, you always used to get them at Christmas, didn't you? You used to get your dad or your uncle, whatever, a cardi.
Yeah, but now it's all
absolutely
trendy.
Fashionable. Well, I like that. Well done, Gareth Southgate.
So I'm quite pleased with that, really. I think because I'm all for comfort now.
Have you got cardis?
I've got one or two.
I like cardigan waistcoats as well. You know, knitted waistcoats.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Oh, I think they're lovely. I love waistcoats of any sort. I saw quite a sight this morning. I know it's fairly common nowadays, but it was just so funny. I was stopped at a traffic light coming into work, so it was dark in London, and a fox went trotting past, holding a McDonald's.
No.
Yeah, you know the brown paper bag that you get your takeaway McDonald's in. It was just like that. So it had obviously been eaten and thrown away, I presume, unless the fox actually went and got him a fresh one. But he was just trotting along quite happily, holding it in his mouth as though he'd just been to McDonald's, bought it, and was taking it home for the kids. I know. And he was a nice fox as well. Sometimes when you see urban foxes, they're a bit scratty.
Yeah, but this was nice.
He wasn't. It was a very good-looking fox.
Yeah. Oh, well, good on him.
With a McDonald's.
Good on him. As long as he doesn't do it too regularly. Don't want him to get fat.
No, exactly. Don't want him eating that sort of food all the time.
But there you go. So whether you've got a local friendly fox or a nice set of cardigans, we'd love to hear from you this morning. gbnews.com/yoursay. You probably have lots to say about the election, because you normally do. And there is more bad news for the Prime Minister as Labour's lead in the polls has grown to a new high not seen since Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
Records being broken all the time at the moment, aren't they? Not the best ones either, if you're a Tory. Yesterday, however, both leaders started their day by launching the all-important campaign battle bus. Yawn. Let's take a listen to what the leaders had to say.
It's great to be here for the launch of the bus, Angela's bus. And it's rather like Tory defectors. You wait for ages and then three come along in a row. But this one, Ange, I'm reliably told, has got a fridge in the back of it. So check that Boris Johnson isn't in there. He used to be around these parts.
Is that he
doesn't stick by anything he says, just constantly changes his mind. And it's clear that Angela Rayner is in charge of the Labour Party and not him at the end of the day. And if he's given in to her and the left on that, imagine what he'll give into when it comes to higher taxes, the union's demands, or weakening our defence and security.
What's important is that the SNP goes to this election to win it, and that's what we're about. We're going into this election to win it.
Tories are on their way out. That's a clear message. But Labour's taking Wales for granted is something that I'm hearing on doorsteps in every part of Wales. So it's Plaid Cymru that's able to say, no, there is another place for you to put your vote that can keep the Tories out, keep Labour in check, and that's Plaid Cymru that will always stand up for Wales.
And after what they promised people in 2019, we now don't believe a single word that they say.
What Reform have to do is to say to people who agree with our policies, come out and vote for us.
It's all to play for still, isn't it?
It is. What intrigues me about that, though, and I still can't get my head around it, and you cannot get a straight answer, actually. I mean, that's a montage of the leaders plus Nigel Farage.
Yes.
He's not the leader of that party.
But he's still making headlines in all of the papers today.
Richard Tice is the leader of that party, but...
Lots of headlines this morning about the fact that Tories are saying we need to welcome him back into the Tory party.
Yeah.
And then maybe he could reform them in opposition or something. But the incredible thing is that Nigel still makes headlines.
He does make the headlines.
No matter what he does.
Well, that was yesterday. Today, the Prime Minister will pledge an extra £1 billion a year to increase the number of GP appointments in the UK.
And Sir Keir Starmer is set to tackle the tricky topic of immigration as he announces plans to cut net migration as questions are raised over whether Labour is offering peerages to some of their MPs stepping down.
Lib Dems are also focusing on the NHS today, promising to reverse Tory health cuts to the system.
And the SNP will launch their Westminster campaign as the leader, John Swinney, promises to put Scotland's interests first.
All right, let's talk to political commentators Sophia Warringer and Jonathan Gibson. Jonathan, can I start with you on this one? Because Sir Keir Starmer has decided to tackle the issue of net migration, 689,000 or something like that it was last year. He says it needs to come down. He's not given any targets, so how does he plan to do it?
Absolutely, and thank you very much for having me on this programme. So yes, Keir Starmer has talked about the need to cut down on net migration, saying that it's currently shockingly high. He has been, I think, quite purposefully vague on exact numbers that he is less hard to be held to sort of account, and I think that's broadly what opposition leaders do when there's an upcoming general election. They try and not be too specific on their policies, so I think that can be expected. But I think what he's talked about is trying to upskill British workers, trying to create systems through which companies have to prioritise using British labour rather than importing it from abroad. And this might mitigate some of the feelings that people are being left behind and unable to seek employment when there are, jobs which are being given to people, skilled workers who are coming in from abroad. So I think he's really signalling a political message that this is a topic that he does care about to many voters across the country who do care about it. And he wants to make change, albeit in a somewhat vague capacity, and using much of what the Tories also have as a framework for tackling immigration.
Sophia, as we watch these leaders launch their battle buses, almost as though it's something new. I mean, for how many years have we had battle buses? You just wonder if there's anything new that the Tories can say that is going to lift them, even in the polls at the moment, or make any difference. What do you think?
I think the incumbent party always faces the challenge of why you did do the things that you said you're doing now while you were in office, when you had the levers of power to do that. So that's a very fair criticism being launched at the Conservative Party at the moment when they talk about things like more GPs, more investment for hospitals and GP and diagnostic services. That's why did you not do that while you were in power? I think there are not so many policy differences really, or massive policy differences between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. I think they're trying to fight this election on competence. And that is something that both leaders are trying to make the message that they are the most competent leader. And I know the Prime Minister is trying to make the message come through that Keir Starmer is at the mercy of the more left-wing faction of his party, which obviously Sir Keir Starmer has tried to stamp out over the last few weeks with the deselections of particular candidates. So I think it's less a policy battle and more a competence battle. And it is a shame that there are no big, bold policy ideas coming through really from either party. Obviously, we've had national service being talked about. We've had votes for at 16 being talked about on the Labour side. They're trying to clearly make an offer to young people, but it's not really setting anyone alight from the policy perspective. I think this is a very political election rather than a policy conversation.
Well, on that point, Jonathan, I mean, how is Labour dealing with the left? Because it is a common theme, and when we hear it from viewers and listeners all the time, people saying, well, if you vote for Labour, you vote for Starmer, you're going to get almost like a Corbynista style. I mean, I know he's not in the party anymore, but a Corbynista style left eventually, or even quite quickly, taking over. So how does he begin to combat that? Is it by, as it's claimed in the papers today, you know, offering peerages to some of the more left MPs to get them to stand down, and so he can parachute people who are more to his way of thinking in?
I mean, I think, to be honest, he's already been combating the far left of his party very, very heavily, even since he's taken office. And that has been something which has been slightly surprising, I think, to me, is the extent to which he's actually successfully been able to do that. I mean, whether that's in regards to Jeremy Corbyn, whether that's with reducing the power of Labour or momentum in the party. He combed through Twitter accounts, social media accounts to see whether people had liked anything or supported things which were controversial in the past. Obviously, recently we had the Diane Abbott scandal, as I can see on the screen, and that was definitely a big talking point. But I think that's a sign of how willing he is to try and reshuffle the party. I think everything in which he'd come out with in terms of moving the party back to the centre, his policies appear radically different to those in 2019. And he's very clearly set out how this isn't a Labour Party of 2019. It's a party which is much more, I'd say, centrist in its policies, much more based on sort of traditional, more neoliberal economic thinking. And he doesn't seem to have given much space or much power to those who are on the far left of the party. In fact, many of them have been far more silent on issues which the far left of the party have been struggling to confront. And so I'd say that he's not only been doing that in terms of who he selected, in terms of who he's allowing to stand, and in terms of his flagship policies, he's been able to kind of keep down the far left within his party and really reorientate his party in a way maybe you could compare to the early 2000s under Blair.
I mean, Sophia, maybe he doesn't have to worry at the moment. He is so far ahead in the polls. Maybe all he has to do is just keep steady and not do anything spectacular or say anything that could be taken badly by whoever on what side. Maybe that's it. He just has to be very, very careful and quite boring for the next few weeks.
I think that Ming Vase strategy that you described, this idea they just have to very carefully take the situation forward without making any catastrophic mistakes, has been one the Labour Party have been pursuing for the last year and a half, 2 years. So I think that will definitely continue. And then obviously the challenge will be, if the Labour Party get into government, what their policies will be and how they will enact them. But just as an example on the bringing down legal migration we were talking about before, one of the proposals Labour has put forward is actually just enacting a law that already exists, so to cracking down on employers who break employment law, particularly regards to wage thresholds. And then the other one is something very vague of compelling Whitehall to ensure that British workers are employed over foreign workers. What does that mean? We're not sure. All these questions are going to have to come out if the Labour Party get into government. So I do think the Labour Party is trying really hard not to mess things up, and that is shown in Sir Keir Starmer's very strong crackdown on left-leaning part of his party candidates over the last few weeks. I don't think that's a good look for him. I think that makes him look paranoid. If the polls they are showing now and they carry on to election day, although obviously we expect them to narrow to some extent, as polls always do approaching polling day, the majority that the Labour Party will get will mean that the left-wing faction of the party will not have a stranglehold over their ability to pass laws, and they will be easily ignored. And I think it looks like he's paranoid and that he doesn't have control if he's trying to conform everyone to his viewpoint. So I think that actually having a broader church of the Labour Party makes him look more in control, and it's a shame that he thinks he's had to stamp down. Although I do think the left of the Labour Party are very dangerous. I don't think they are good policy makers. I don't think they are good politicians. It makes Sir Keir Starmer look paranoid if he is trying to control them too much.
OK. Sophia Warringer, Jonathan Gibson, good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, by that, I mean, he can't do anything right, can he?
He's sending Angela Rayner off around the country in a bus.
Well, yes, but it's if he cracks down on the Labour left, he looks paranoid. But if he doesn't, then people are going to say, oh, they're going to take over.
And it could rise up to bite him. A bit later on, you never know.
You're not impressed by the battle buses?
No, I really cannot believe we are still going, ooh, look at battle buses. They're just buses. I mean, when they were
they're
first...
all painted up and...
Yeah, but when they were first
fancy.
sort of done, I mean, how many years ago did they start the battle bus thing?
30 years more.
Are we meant to be that impressed by a blinking bus?
Yeah, but gets us in the spirit. It's like the Coca-Cola thing at Christmas.
Oh, that's different.
It's not.
Oh,
it's exactly the same. It's just a lorry with lights on.
Yes, I know.
But this is...
It's got a bit more atmosphere than, I mean, for heaven's sake. Is it just Keir Starmer's way of sort of getting Angela Rayner out the way? Ange. One of our beautiful, lovely viewers has said, yes, Labour has got a red battle bus with a red battle axe inside.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Wow. It's interesting, though. I mean, if they do get into power, will she stay in that position? Probably. Will that give her a lot of power? I don't know, look at John Prescott and Tony Blair.
Yes.
It's exactly what they did.
Everybody said it at the time, didn't they? Some people said what a clever move it was to give John Prescott the deputy premiership. But actually, he didn't manage to achieve any of the things he wanted to.
Not really.
No. They did a couple of good double acts, but that was it. He went very quiet after a while, didn't he?
Yeah, but he did get 2 Jags.
He always had 2 Jags.
Always had 2 Jags, so the missus didn't get her hair messed up driving from place to place,
right.
all that sort of thing.
Well, yes, and some people are saying Angela Rayner is the 2-house version of the 2 Jags. You see, it goes on, doesn't it? That's politics for you.
It is. They always dig out the worst, don't they? But anyway, there's going to be lots of coverage today, of course. And, of course, Camilla's got some great guests on her show today at 9:30, so there's lots to keep you going. In the meantime...
18 minutes past 6, yeah. We're looking back 30 years ago right now. If you remember, and you probably do because it was such a terrible disaster, an RAF Chinook helicopter crashed into the side of a mountain in Scotland.
Yeah, on board 4 crew and 25 of the UK's senior Northern Ireland intelligence and counter-terrorism experts.
Well, today, the families of those who lost their lives have launched a campaign for justice, accusing the Ministry of Defence of covering things up.
Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has the story.
As he kissed her goodbye with...
Ian Phoenix was in charge of a counter-terrorism group dedicated to bringing peace to Northern Ireland. He was a husband and a father.
He was a real Irishman. He had the twinkly Irish eyes. He enjoyed a good joke. He liked a good glass of wine.
Susan Phoenix first heard of the accident that killed her husband on her car radio.
I was just driving along going, no, no, no. I can still see it. I can still feel it, even 30 years on.
On the 2nd of June, 1994, the Chinook helicopter that was taking them to a peace conference crashed into the side of a mountain on the Mull of Kintyre, killing 4 crew and 25 of the country's top counter-terrorism experts. At a board of inquiry, the Ministry of Defence concluded there was no doubt whatsoever the accident had been caused by the gross negligence of the two pilots, Flight Lieutenants Richard Cook and Jonathan Tapper. But there was doubt, plenty of it.
Something had gone badly wrong because they flew into the side of a mountain, but they were trying to the very last to pull up the nose and they couldn't. So there is no doubt there was something wrong with the craft.
There were no eyewitnesses on that foggy night, no flight data recorder, no voice recorder. It took until 2011 for the Ministry of Defence to admit they had not a shred of evidence. The Defence Secretary at the time, Liam Fox, exonerated the pilots and apologised to their families.
I have written to the widows of the two pilots, to the father of Jonathan Tapper and to the brother of Richard Cook to express the Ministry of Defence's apology for the distress which was caused to them by the findings of negligence.
But if the pilots didn't cause the crash, what did? At the time of the crash, systematic errors in the software that controlled the engines had been reported. In fact, the MOD were in a legal dispute with the manufacturers of this software, a fact that wasn't shared with the inquiry. David Hill was an aeronautical engineer for the MOD at the time. He says the MOD had seen its safety budget slashed in the run-up to the accident.
But the evidence doesn't lie. People do. We've got hard copy reports, documents saying the aircraft is not airworthy. You are not permitted to fly it.
In a statement, the Ministry of Defence told GB News, in 2010, the Mull of Kintyre independent review was carried out and the findings were fully accepted. The review did not find new evidence to suggest mechanical failure, and no safety issues with the Chinook Mark II were raised in the report. This weekend, the families have formed the Chinook Justice Campaign. But justice may never come. The MOD's file on the accident has been locked away and can't be made public for 100 years.
Why would you lock up a document unless it was going to incriminate somebody? It just does not make sense.
To the families, it smacks of a cover-up at the very top of the establishment. They're hoping they can persuade the MOD to unlock the files, unlock the secrets, so they can finally know what happened on that foggy mountain 30 years ago. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Isn't it interesting with human nature, this need to know all these years on? Because it won't make any difference to anything.
Well,
because
people say they get more of a sense of closure. I don't know whether they do, really.
No.
It's just that you have to do what you can to answer that question, don't you? Otherwise, you're haunted by it.
But
why did it happen?
It's very odd knowing that there are some answers out there that are locked away and we can't see. And that's frustrating, isn't it?
Got a nice message in from Clark who says, I love a cardi. We were talking about cardigans.
Earlier. Yes, they're fashionable, they're back. It's all down to Gareth Southgate, apparently.
Yeah. Well, Clark says, I've got a full range of winter, spring, summer weights, always worn then, but now I'm 57 and I'm right back in fashion.
Yes, there you go. You see, you don't have to do anything. If you hold on to all your clothes, eventually you're back in fashion.
Well, that's very true. Everything comes round again.
I wish I'd held on to all my stuff from the 80s.
Yeah.
Because that's all back now, and all the jeans and all the rest of it now, which is sort of really baggy.
And for women, it was shoulder pads, suits and everything, and I've hung on to most of mine.
You had some awful jumpers back in the day.
Oh, I did, but they're brilliant. They were wonderful. I thought they were so wonderful at the time.
Yeah.
But they had huge shoulder pads, very, very woolly and fussy. But also, it's the suits. It was the power dress suits.
I had a batwing jumper.
Batwing, yeah. Did you?
You had a batwing jumper, which was fashionable at the time.
Yeah.
And it was worn by Ian Beale on EastEnders. And then our local shop was selling it, saying, this is what Ian Beale's wearing.
In batwing
jumpers.
jumpers.
It was like neon yellow. It was grey, but with neon yellow and neon pink stripes through. Very 80s. Batwing.
I mean, 80s was not known as, a high fashion era, except that now you look back and it was absolutely gross, but they're worth hanging on to, some of those things, aren't they?
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And 53 people were arrested after trying to break into Wembley Stadium last night for the Champions League final. 5 arrests were made for pitch invasion, the rest for breaches of security. Topped off a busy day of policing, with the Met deploying more than 2,000 officers across the day during other protests and demonstrations in London.
South Africa's ruling political party, the ANC, has suffered their worst result in 30 years, forcing them into a power-sharing agreement. With almost all votes now counted from Wednesday's election, the ANC is on 40% of the vote. That's down from their previous 58%. The ANC has always polled above 50 since the country's first democratic elections in '94, which of course saw Nelson Mandela become president.
Boeing's highly anticipated space launch called off last night, less than 4 minutes before 0. It was delayed by an automated computer system which takes over the flight sequence. It's the company's first attempt to fly the Starliner with astronauts on board, taking them to the International Space Station.
I hadn't heard anything about that Starliner.
About Starliner?
Until I heard that it had been delayed.
Called off, yeah. I mean, it would have been... It's one of those things, if you go there to watch an incredible launch like that, and it gets called off. I know there are bigger things to worry about.
Yes, of course.
But it's so disappointing if you go and see something and it just doesn't happen.
But I've actually booked a holiday to Florida.
Oh, we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get out there and you're waiting and you've worked it all out, got a good place to see it and everything.
Yeah,
and then, yes, at the last minute sometimes, literally almost the last minute, they call it off. And they're not sure whether they've got a weather window again while you're there.
But
you've got to get on and enjoy your holiday.
You've got to think of the safety. You don't want these things to go
gosh,
wrong.
No, absolutely.
Now, ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we're sharing the stories of the men who risked their lives for our freedom. And today, 98-year-old Alec Penstone is the gentleman we're looking at. He joined the Royal Navy in 1943, training as a submarine detector.
Now, for D-Day, his job was to protect the Normandy invasion force by listening out for German U-boats trying to torpedo the Allied fleet.
Well, Will Hollis spoke with Alec at the Union Jack Club in London.
Well, I'm amazed at one thing, that I'm still here, because I certainly didn't expect to be here at my time of life. My life was going to be short, but not very sweet.
Alec Penstone joined the Royal Navy in 1943. The 98-year-old served on the escort aircraft carrier HMS Campania, running supplies to Britain's allies in the Soviet Union. The white beret he wears highlights his role in the Arctic. He spent D-Day 3 decks down, listening for the enemy.
My role was a submarine detector, protecting the fleet going across to Normandy from the attack by U-boats. So therefore the U-boat pens were round at Brest. So I did not land on anywhere. I was just the cover force to protect the invasion fleet going over. Because if they'd have come out and Brest in the numbers that they had, they would have decimated the whole idea of Normandy landings. As it was quite a near thing sometimes. They had to come out just below periscope depth where we used to wait for them. We certainly managed to stop them coming out, but unfortunately one managed to get through from the Arctic way and torpedoed one of the ships there with a tremendous loss of life.
80 years on, Alec remembers the sense of duty.
I'm proud of being able to do that rather than sit back and let somebody else do it.
He defended Britain when all seemed lost.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in. It's a long, long waiting Tipperary. We're still around. England, or Britain, still carries on.
Will Hollis, GB News.
No, well, that's a picture of the day.
Well, it really is.
And I think you need to compare that with, and it's a shame we can't pull it up separately, it was in that report from Will, a picture of him when he was serving as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a child, a baby, doing that job, and there he is 80 years later.
You see them in movies, don't you? The young men with the big earphones on, listening for the sound of other submarines and things. And they got really good at it. They could tell what sort.
Well, I mean, the sonar people on subs are incredibly skilled. It's incredible. It's incredible. Of course, nowadays they've got all the waterfall displays and things that they use, whereas waterfall displays they call them. Yeah, it shows the sonar tracking thing. So it's but back then, of course, it was. I mean, literally just listening. I mean, your ears pinned back. And
fancy doing that responsible a job on D-Day.
Well, the fact that he said, well, I didn't land. I was just one of the lads. Just one.
But they all say that, don't they? They all say, I was just doing my bit.
Remarkable. I'm really, really pleased that we've managed to send Will out to talk to these people.
I think Will Hollis really enjoys talking to these people, doesn't he?
Well, and so you should.
Yeah.
It's an honour. It's an honour and a pleasure.
Yeah.
Right, let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Talking of honours, here's Honour Critic.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we could expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, though there is some cloud across in the northwest. There should be a little bit of mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland, though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over western hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here, but elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy, a few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon it should be largely dry, just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later, and it will be brightening up across Scotland and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, we've got a brand new summer giveaway for you. £15,000 in cash. That could make summer spectacular. Plus, we're going to throw in a brand new iPhone, AirPods and 500 quid to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. Here are all the details you need.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck indeed.
Yes. Do you know what? I'm just going through the papers, and we are going through the papers a little bit later on. This is in... What's this in? It's in The People, which is obviously left-leaning. But they've got a big interview with one of Rishi Sunak's former teachers.
Oh, ooh. What does he say?
Well, he's absolutely slating him in very unpleasant terms, actually. I'm very, very disappointed in the way he turned out, self-serving, opportunistic. I don't care if you don't like Rishi Sunak or if you're not going to vote for him. That's entirely that's an individual's choice. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with a teacher slamming a former pupil.
Yes, I think that's...
it breaks a sort of code somehow.
A teacher shouldn't do that. That's a horrid, hurtful thing to say.
I think it's really hurtful. He was his maths teacher. Did it?
Yeah. Back in the 80s, some newspaper went back and they found my old music teacher. And he was saying, yes, she used to do this and blah, blah. And they said, did she have a good voice? You know, could she sing well? And he said, she was never as good as she thought she was. And I thought at the time, that is a hurtful thing, that even
really
if it was true, and he really wanted to say that, why would a teacher say that about a pupil?
I think people who do that as teachers are not the right people to be teachers.
No.
You can support a pupil if they're doing well, and if you don't support them, if you just keep
I mean, for heaven's sake, what more does he want? His pupil became Prime Minister.
Yeah.
He might not be the Prime Minister he would want to vote for, but he still did quite well, didn't he?
I mean, I just think that's a disgrace, actually. Teachers should not do that.
Yeah, but the reporter shouldn't go and find the teacher either.
No. Anyway, there you go. Just thought I'd get that off my chest. Aidan McGee's going to be here with all your sport in just a moment.
Join me, Camila Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Time for the sport this morning. Aidan's here, morning.
Good morning to you both. How are you?
All right, kicked off yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, unexpectedly. I mean, we were very much focused on the game in the lead-up to the final, the showpiece final. Highly prestigious for Wembley to be holding a Champions League final, first time in 11 years. But 53 arrests last night. There was video knocking around of fans rushing, or no, that's the kind of phrase they use, rushing the Club Wembley entrance, which is the hospitality at the stadium. Shades of Euro 2020 when fans tried to unlawfully gain access during the tournament, which was played in 2021 during COVID. It wasn't a full attendance that day, and so the fans felt they could occupy the spare seats. There were no such spare seats last night, but fans did get in, and 3 separate instances of fans were reported or seen on television of supporters gaining, or I say supporters to use the term very loosely, but gaining access to the pitch, looking for photos with players. The feed that I was watching on TNT, their coverage, their live coverage, the cameras pulled away. So the initial thought was maybe it was Just Stop Oil protesters, but it wasn't them. It looked like it was just local fans trying to get in, similar to what we saw in Euro 2020, as I say. Now, it's not a good look, because although the Met claimed to have dealt with it...
They said they'd put a ring of steel around Wembley.
£5 million and 2,000 officers on duty last night. I'll just read you the statement they came out with as well. We're confident that the overwhelming majority of attempts to unlawfully gain access to Wembley this evening were unsuccessful thanks to the efforts of officers, stewards and other stadium staff. As I say, it's not a good look, because there was a story yesterday knocking around with Sadiq Khan saying that they want to see WrestleMania come to London. They want to see the Super Bowl come to London. Wembley would be right in the firing line for these events, to host these events. And if we can't just keep a load of local supporters away from the most obvious areas or obvious entry points to the stadium, as I say, I don't think it's particularly good, and it needs to be looked at.
There are some reports. There are some reports saying it's social media is influence as well. There's an influencer, particularly well-known influencer in Russia, apparently, who was offering money to somebody who could disrupt and take selfies.
I did look at that. I can't verify that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you know, when you know there's going to be some notoriety afterwards and get some traction on social media, it gives you the incentive to do it, doesn't it?
Yeah. All right. What about the match?
The match. Well, look, the scoreline wasn't unexpected. A 15th title for Real Madrid. Underlining their status as the premium club side in world football. But that wasn't the story of the game. They won 2-0, but Borussia Dortmund, goodness me, Stephen, 2 massive chances in the first half. If they'd scored them, I see, given how Real Madrid were playing in the first half, I don't see them recovering from that. It would have been too much. And the ascendancy with the Borussia Dortmund fans, they had some fantastic fans, colourfully dressed as well. I think the momentum that would have garnered would have been enough to see them over the line. For Jude Bellingham as well, fantastic from an England point of view that he's gone and got a Champions League medal in his locker. He said he couldn't have dreamt it any better, coming all the way from Stourbridge in Birmingham to the biggest stage of all in club football, and winning the Champions League was magnificent. And going into the Euros in a few weeks' time, obviously England kick off on Sunday, June the 16th. You've got another player in the lineup now who's won a Champions League. That's absolutely brilliant from his point of view, and for the country, we hope. And as an event, look, after the first 2 minutes of the game, which were obviously delayed, once we got past that, I don't think it was a bad final. It just seems inevitable, though, that Real Madrid win these things. And the manager himself has won 5 now by himself. He's won 3 with Real Madrid, 2 with AC Milan. Probably the most successful coach of recent times. And I'm somebody who likes to see the big awards in football go round, be passed around, and I think that's something like 6 in 10 years now for Real Madrid. I have to check on that, but
there's a lovely picture of Jude what's his surname? Bellingham, with his mum.
Yes,
because she ran onto the pitch with him afterwards and had some pictures.
She could have been arrested.
Yeah, no, she did it right. But you know, it's lovely that he took his mum there, and she was able to. I mean, she was crying with delight.
He's 20 years old.
Is that all he is?
There you go.
Guy's a baby.
I know, so much more to achieve. You wouldn't blame him for calling it a day now, would you? I'm done now.
He's got enough money.
Yeah, he has it.
Yeah.
All right, should we talk boxing? Because, I mean, all hail Frank Warren.
10 points to 0. So that's the...
I mean, phenomenal.
Yeah, it was actually. I mean, it's quite... Somebody asked me backstage, is it damaging for Eddie Hearn, given that all his fighters lost? But, I mean, there were some shock ones as well. I mean, Daniel Dubois wasn't expected to beat Filip Hrgovic. That was an 8th-round stoppage. We saw Deontay Wilder, who was the captain of Barry Hearn's Matchroom side. That was the main event of the card. Yeah. He was stopped. I think that's got to be the end of his career now, surely. I mean, how many chances do you get? The Alabama Slammer. You know, sooner or later we've got to see this big punch, haven't we? He effectively lost 3 times. One of them was scored a draw against Tyson Fury. Got beaten by Joseph Parker in December. Beaten comprehensively last night by Zhilei Zhang, somebody who you would have felt a year ago was a bit of a journeyman. He's really upped his game in the last year or so. So that's 5 defeats that I can think of, although, as I say, one of them was scored a draw. How many more times you get to get these big paydays before somebody works out that maybe you're not as good as everyone thinks you are?
Yeah.
But look, a great event. Doesn't look good in terms of.
I know what you're thinking.
Eddie Hearn, but a good night of boxing, and it was scheduled after the Champions League final, so I don't think it lost any traction in terms of. I think it was a good. If you're able to stay up late and watch it all, I think you've had a good night's entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, a cracking Saturday night, actually.
Oh, brilliant, yeah. I mean, it was worth staying up, even
Well, you had to stay up late.
Sleep a little bit.
You had to stay up late to watch the tennis as well, didn't you?
Yeah, just a little bit.
At the French Open, Novak Djokovic, they didn't finish until...
Well, he started
3 in the morning.
He started at just before 20 to 11. I just don't see how.
That's crazy.
You can't do that at Wimbledon because of the
bylaws.
The bylaws locally, exactly. So it's finished at 3:07. So it's all very well starting that late, but you go 2 sets down, you have to take it to 5 sets. Djokovic's 37 years old. I mean, he hasn't got much. What about his knees? What about his poor joints?
I fancy waiting all day to play.
Well, it was
your best.
rain affected. It was rain affected,
Yeah.
and I would have thought that. See, I remember back in the day, Wimbledon middle Sunday was the day off, and that was scheduled to you could play that. You could use those hours or that schedule to play in the overhanging game.
Yes.
I don't know if they had that built into the schedule at the French Open. I'd have to check, but it doesn't seem satisfactory that a match starting at 22:37. That then goes on to last 4 hours and 29 minutes, and a marathon match as well. I don't think that's sustainable.
I don't know how you'd spend the day. You couldn't
sleep.
Well, you couldn't, could you? You couldn't sleep. Well, what if they suddenly turned around and said the rain stopped and you're on in an hour?
I'd be like, bring me a coffee.
Yeah,
I don't know.
A few.
I don't think he drinks coffee, does he? Because his body is a temple.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
he went
no,
free about 13 years ago, and he started winning Grand Slam. Amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Anyway, he survived, didn't he? Just to add.
Sorry?
He survived, didn't he?
He survived. Yes, he did.
Won.
He won in 5
in the
sets.
end.
Yeah, I mean, looking ominous. He's been to the last 16 now against Francisco Cerundolo of Argentina, and as I say, number 1 seed, 37 years old. He looks around at the. I mean, there's still some big beasts in there. Yannick Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz as well, and Alexander Zverev. So plenty to do. But into the second week, and given his pedigree, he looks ominous.
OK, Aidan, we'll see you a little bit later on. Thank you.
In a couple of moments, we'll be going through the papers.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, England fans have got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Right, time for the papers at 6:49 with writer and journalist Andy Jones and political commentator Suzanne Evans. Good to see you both this morning. All right, a bit of politics, Andy, which is on every front page, pretty much.
Yeah, I don't know how quickly you want me to blitz all of them.
Oh, yeah, blitz it, please,
all of them, right.
we might fall asleep.
Observer leads with Sunak suffers poll blow as cash for votes row erupts, exactly as it says on the tin. The Mail, Tories SOS to Rishi, give us tax cuts now. Basically, the Conservatives are saying that Rishi needs to announce some tax cuts. They've already tried a couple of cuts with national insurance. It's not had any impact in the polls.
I don't think we'd believe it if it was...
cuts.
No, not now, because you'd sort of say... I mean, who wouldn't want a big tax cut? But you just go, well, how the heck are we going to pay for it? Now, if we could afford it...
And it would just look such an obvious election thing, wouldn't it?
Especially as Rishi's been sort of campaigning that he's had all these... He's kept taxes high in order to lower inflation and all these sort of things. I'm lowering inflation by keeping taxes they are, and then cut taxes. I mean, it's quite a difficult thing. So,
OK, what's Labour saying on the Telegraph?
Labour were...
it's not what they're saying.
The Chancellor is saying Labour will betray pensioners again. £1,000 tax raid on OAPs, Express says as well. Obviously, this is becoming a generational election in the terms of the Conservatives giving national service to 18-year-olds, not doing an awful lot for young people, apparently being more protective of the elderly with, what do we call it, their triple
lock and quadruple lock.
And interestingly enough, and this is an old trick by many PMs or prospective PMs, Labour offers MPs peerages to step down. We obviously had this do-si-do with Diane Abbott this week. Will she, won't she stand? There's also talk of Labour being accused of putting all sorts of friendly faces in the right positions. Josh Simons, Luke Akehurst, Alex Barras Curtis have all worked for Starmer in different places before.
That's politics, Suzanne, isn't it?
Hey, do you know what? I was just thinking that. It's horrible, but it's politics. Politics is nasty. Politics is dirty. Politics is a blood sport. Don't get involved in it. It's bad for your health. No, seriously, this is what happened. Here you go. You know, Andy very rightly said we've got the Observer, we've got Sunak's poll blow, we've got the cash for votes row, what they call pork barrel politics, when you, at the very last minute before an election, shove money into certain marginal constituencies. And then we've got Labour doing the other sort of bribery, putting MPs into the House of Lords. So if they're not fit to be MPs, why are they fit to sit in the House of Lords?
Dame Diane Abbott, could you take that?
No. What's this? I mentioned this just a minute ago. It's in the... People, and probably in the Mirror as well, actually, because they seem to be identical these days. Yeah. Suzanne, I taught Rishi, but I'd never vote for him. This sort of...
Yeah, this story, I mean, I'm sorry, mate, you've got this so wrong. You know, his name's Nick McKinnon. He's a teacher who taught Rishi Sunak at Winchester College. And he's basically, you read this article in the Mirror, and he comes across as a kind of hard left anti-Brexiteer, really. And he says he's never going to forgive Rishi. And I'm sorry, I just think a teacher talking about someone who was a young person at the time, and I'm not one to stand up for Rishi Sunak, but I think this is unprofessional of him to do this. I think it's wrong. I don't think, you know, any one of our teachers to suddenly come out of the woodwork and start attacking us. I just don't think it's on.
He says, I don't know how he sleeps at night.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't forgive him for Brexit.
Yeah, it's an anti-Brexit rant. I don't know how he sleeps at night. The most interesting line out of all of it is he says, I don't remember Rishi at all at school. He seemed like a good boy and got good grades. And then he just says, basically, I don't like Tories, I don't like Brexit, I don't know how he sleeps at night, I don't like this. And again, it's unprofessional. I think it breaks that covenant between teachers and pupils. And also, you're talking as well about how old would he have been then? Sort of 14, 15?
15, that sort of age, yeah.
You know, we all change. We were all different people. We're not the same people we were when we were in our teens. Most of us aren't anyway. And it's so unfair.
But you should be able to trust a teacher not to say things years later that are just horrible.
If you haven't got anything nice to say nothing. Someone messaged in, actually, and said, well, isn't this free speech? And I get the point you're making, but I sort of think it is that there is a sort of rule about... you're meant to be able to trust teachers, and they shouldn't slag you off.
It's free speech. They're in the Mirror. He's had his free speech, our free speech to say we think he done wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, it's not even criticising him about his role in education. If he was a teacher saying, look, we taught Rishi, this is how he fixes education, then it's within a context. He's just having a personal rant.
He's just having a part,
It's an anti-Brexit rant.
Let's have a look at the Times, Andy. Should be Sunday Times. And Farage It's come out
He was
again.
out campaigning yesterday, wasn't he?
My plan is to take over the Tories.
Yes. Reform leader Richard Tice, friend of the show, is doing his bit to oust one Conservative. He's trying to row back a lead in the constituency. He's fighting for Richard Tice. But his honorary president has a bigger goal, absorbing the party entirely and remaking the right in his own image. This is talking about Farage, and Tice has been talking about how Nigel Farage plans after the election, predictably when there's been sort of Conservative fallout and lots of heads rolling, to sort of own and own the conversation in the right. He's not sort of talking about a super Farage party that consumes all of them, but own that sort of right.
You know this area better than the rest of us, Suzanne. And the sort of gentleman involved in a way, really. I can't help but... I quite like Richard Tice. When we see him here, and we have a good old chinwag, actually. We get on, he's a nice fella. Nigel I like very much as an individual. But it just seems like this is almost like a Blair Brown sort of row brewing.
Oh, there's an interesting thought. I don't know. I've never spoken to either of them about this, so I don't know. But I don't think either of them are going to be taking over the Conservatives anytime soon, that's for sure. The Conservative Party is very loyal to itself. And I think if there was... I just don't see... You know, it's interesting. So this story, it's a former minister saying it, but it's unnamed. So it's all speculation.
It's all speculation.
Makes a good headline.
You two, thank you. We'll see you a little bit later on.
Let's catch up with the weather now, with Honor.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we can expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, though there is some cloud across in the northwest. It should be a little bit mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland, though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we'll start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over western hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here. But elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy, a few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon it should be largely dry, just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later, and it will be brightening up across Scotland and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives. Again, down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of June. Today, the battle bus campaigns get underway as Rishi Sunak faces another poll blow. Sir Keir Starmer set to tackle the tricky problem of immigration.
And it's 30 years since the RAF Chinook helicopter crash in the Mull of Kintyre, if you remember it. The families of victims are still searching for answers about what happened.
So there is no doubt there was something wrong with the craft.
We'll continue our series of D-Day veteran stories as we run up to the 80th anniversary of the historic landings later this week. Today, Will Hollis has been talking to 98-year-old Alec Penstone.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in.
And there are incredible new breakthroughs in treating prostate and breast cancers, which could help thousands of Brits.
David Beckham and the King have joined forces as they, believe it or not, bond over bees.
Good morning. It was Real Madrid who once again triumphed in the Champions League final as their win over Borussia Dortmund gave them a record-extending 15th title. But there was another worrying security breach at Wembley. More on that later. Elsewhere, Erik ten Hag is facing an uncertain future as Manchester United manager, but says the £400 million lavished by the club on underperforming players isn't his fault.
Well, there's going to be plenty of warm sunshine across the country today, though a little bit cloudier across the northwest with some rain and drizzle, and a bit cooler here too. So stay tuned for all your latest weather updates.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Just on that, the teacher's story. There's loads. I'm just trying to pick ones which are particularly, well, a little bit different. Jackie says, how many of us slagged off our teachers after leaving school? We've all got teachers we hated. Yeah, I mean, that's right. But you wouldn't do it necessarily if you were in a prime position. I mean,
you wouldn't give an interview to a newspaper about what a horrible teacher you had.
I wouldn't.
Naming them.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I had one or two teachers I didn't like. I wouldn't dream of doing that. I wouldn't, because it's not fair.
I tell you what, we as we grew older, as you go into the sixth form, we started to understand our teachers a bit better. You know, when you're younger, you do sort of make fun of them, or you do just privately, or you have an opinion. But as we got older, we sort of started to understand them a bit
Well, the nice
better.
thing, when I went to sixth form college, and it still is up there, it's separate. So none of the schools don't have sixth forms, or you all just go to a sixth form college afterwards, which was great because it was like going somewhere totally brand new. And you called your teachers by their first name.
My goodness, shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, all that sort of thing. And it was great. I had a great time at Barrow Sixth Form. It's still going. A really good, really good time.
Actually, thinking
I often think of Sue de Groyther. I've got to mention Sue de Groyther,
who was
De Gruyter.
Yes,
That's an
funny
unusual
name. She was my sociology teacher. And with her, she was quite dramatic. She had very long grey hair, all curly and all the rest of it. She was quite a character. I really liked her. But weirdly, she's got an identical twin sister. And so even now, if I'm up and you go up and you have to go up to the
De Gruyter twins.
Are you Sue? Were you
I
the
see.
other
So
one?
you couldn't tell.
You really can't tell the difference.
Oh,
No, so I hope she's all right.
And isn't it funny how you remember the names as well? I mean, when I was when I was a kid at school, we all had a crush on Mr. Vale. He was a very good-looking young man in a girls' school. Gosh, only knows. We all giggled round him all the time. And then there was a Miss McLennan, who was a war. It's interesting as you're looking towards D-Day. She was a war widow.
Right.
And when we didn't understand that, when I say she was Miss, she never quite got to marry him. He went off to war and never came back. They were engaged. She used to wear her engagement ring. I know. And we used to make fun of her because she wasn't exactly the best-looking lady. And it was only when we went into the sixth form, she taught French, and I did French A-level, and she started to tell us about him. He went to the bridge too far, Arnhem. He was killed at Arnhem and never came back. So she never fell in love with anyone else again. And that's what I mean. You start to understand that these people are human beings.
God.
Yeah.
Isn't that awful?
I know.
So awful.
But I was taught by a whole generation of, and certainly people a bit older than me were, by Miss Everything, because they lost their men in the war. I bet you've got stories at home. You were taught by somebody who...
You know, and whatever is going on... Now, I know we all like to moan about the state of the country, and at least most of us are not in that position now. Thank God.
Yeah.
Let's hope we never have to be again.
Poor dear Miss McLennan.
Right, let's turn our attention to the election. Bad news for the Prime Minister as Labour's lead in the polls grow to a new high not seen since Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
Who, you may ask? Yesterday, however, both leaders started their day by launching the all-important campaign battle bus. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
It's great to be here for the launch of the bus, Angela's bus. And it's rather like Tory defectors. You wait for ages and then three come along in a row. But this one, Ange, I'm reliably told, has got a fridge in the back of it. So check that Boris Johnson isn't in there. He used to be around these parts.
Is that he doesn't stick by anything he says, just constantly changes his mind. And it's clear that Angela Rayner is in charge of the Labour Party and not him at the end of the day. And if he's given in to her and the left on that, imagine what he'll give in to when it comes to higher taxes, the union's demands, or weakening our defence and security.
What's important is that the SNP goes to this election to win it, and that's what we're about. We're going into this election to win it.
Tories are on their way out. That's a clear message. But Labour's taking Wales for granted is something that I'm hearing on doorsteps in every part of Wales. So it's Plaid Cymru that's able to say, no, there is another place for you to put your vote that can keep the Tories out, keep Labour in check, and that's Plaid Cymru that will always stand up for Wales.
And after what they promised people in 2019, we now don't believe a single word that they say.
What Reform have to do is to say to people who agree with our policies, come out and vote for us.
Well, today the Prime Minister is going to pledge an extra £1 billion a year to increase the number of GP appointments.
And Sir Keir Starmer is going to tackle the tricky topic of immigration today as he announces plans to cut net migration as questions are raised over whether Labour is offering peerages to some MPs to step down.
Lib Dems focusing on the NHS. They're promising to reverse Tory cuts to the health system.
And the SNP will launch their Westminster campaign as leader John Swinney promises to put Scotland's interests first.
And let's talk to political commentator Owen Bennett. Morning to you, Owen. Look, I think the one that's going to grab most people's attention first off today is Labour, because they are trying to get their heads round
Well, it's not just immigration, it's the legal net migration figures, which often sort of get a little bit ignored because we focus on the small boats. But net migration is huge. Keir Starmer says he will bring it down. Do we know how?
Yeah, net migration, I think it's the second highest level on record the last time the figures came out. I think that his focus is that if you are an employer and you offer a job to a migrant, you have to have demonstrated, first of all, that you could have offered it to a Brit, and he's putting in training schemes. And he's also going to be quite harsh with people who exploit this, and he's saying you're not going to be fined, you're going to be banned from hiring overseas workers. So his way is basically trying to encourage more jobs to go to Brits. Now, we've had this before. We've had Rishi Sunak talking about things like this, talking about how we've got people who are economically inactive, I believe is the term, and trying to get them back into work. But what Keir Starmer's not done is he's not put any figures on this. We all remember David Cameron getting net migration down to tens of thousands, which got more and more ludicrous every time the figures came out, and was further and further away from that. So Keir Starmer's not fallen into that trap.
No, it's interesting. We've seen them all launch their battle buses yesterday, getting around the country. I suppose that's always an important thing just before an election. We've seen Starmer and Rishi Sunak argue before, haven't we? Obviously, at Prime Minister's questions. But they're very different at the moment on the podium in front of people, aren't they? Who do you think is the more impressive?
Well, neither of them are particularly amazing orators, are there? We're not looking at people that are going to be studying their speeches for years to come. So I don't think, neither are like kind of Nigel Farage style pizzazz, for example. I think that the trouble that Rishi's got is that he has to attack Labour a lot more, and therefore he can be seen as coming across as slightly negative. Whereas I think Labour can just sit back a little bit and they can be slightly more general over things. So, Rishi Sunak's stump speech is very much Labour haven't got a plan, and now he's shifting it to, well, actually, Angela Rayner's the one who's really in charge, and just look at the Dan Abbott row, and that's the evidence for that. But I don't think anybody's going to be, for the rest of their life thinking, do you remember that day that Rishi Sunak and or Keir Starmer came to our constituency? What an amazing speech they gave. JFK, these people are not.
No, well, you could well have a point. In terms of the Tories, they're saying, they're looking at the health service in all of this, but, what seems to be the crux of it all is saying, well, actually, you can do a lot more at the pharmacy. Go and see your pharmacist for a whole load more things, and they'll sort you out without having to even try to get a GP appointment. I have to say, what strikes me with that is, what are the pharmacies getting out of it all? Because they've been complaining for a long time, and the National Pharmacy Association, that the contracts aren't worth the money they're written on nowadays. That a lot of them saying they just can't survive. So a higher workload for your pharmacist isn't necessarily a good thing.
Absolutely, and there's been cuts to pharmacies across the country. And are you just shifting the bottleneck? Are you saying instead of you're standing for hours trying to get something at the GP, you're now going to be waiting even longer at the pharmacy? I think the trouble with this policy is that he seems to have found an extra sort of £1 billion down the back of the sofa, and people will go, hold on a minute, you're promising this £1 billion for us tomorrow. Where was it yesterday? You said you're going to get it through cutting down on NHS middle management. Well, why didn't you do that for the time you're in power? Why is it taken now? So I think that people are going to treat this policy with a slight degree of disbelief, perhaps, because the argument will be, well, if you could have done this earlier, why didn't you? But it's interesting, isn't it, that the day that Labour tried to park their bus on the Tory lawns on immigration, you see the Tories trying to come back on NHS. So today's the day where they're sort of venturing into each other's paths on the football pitches, if you like.
I think the reaction from a lot of our viewers is that this is just election talk, isn't it? They're very cynically bringing in things that actually, as you say, some people feel they should have brought in years ago. And the minute Labour open their mouth, you can't trust what they say either. And it's almost as though we have to endure this period of election speak.
And I have no idea you are so cynical, thinking that politicians would just say whatever they wanted to get good headlines. But I think you're right. And actually, let's be honest, we've been through so many of these things in recent times, elections and referendums and leadership contests. We've all heard this so many times. And most of us now, as you said, GB News viewers, know that let's just wait to see what's in the manifesto. That's a slightly more reliable document. But yes, a lot of this stuff people just go, oh, all right then, okay, sure, yeah, we'll see it when you deliver it.
Yeah, I was just...
What are you looking for?
I was just trying to find a comment. I can't remember what paper it was in. There was a comment about Ed Davey, because I wanted to mention the Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
I don't know if it was in this or it might have been the Express. I don't know. But it was sort of saying... It was going through what all the various party leaders are doing, but then saying, Ed Davey's been seen playing with, it's like sort of soft play in water parks and all this sort of thing. He looks like he's on more of a school trip than a political campaign. Has he got it right, do you think, or has he got the balance wrong?
Well, it's all about cut-through, I think, with the Lib Dems. And this is what Nick Clegg did in 2015, isn't it, when the coalition came to an end? He was round, Joe 8 swinging on zip lines, and it didn't do any difference to them. They were absolutely decimated in that election. So I can sort of understand Ed Davey's tactic, like if we can just get a picture on the front page of the paper every now and then and me doing something slightly different than standing in front of a bus, maybe it'll get some cut-through. I thought it was interesting today that Ed Davey, I think, was taking a day off to spend time with his son, and I really thought that was interesting and honest and actually something people would like. He's gone, you know what, someday I want to spend time with my family, and he's been quite open about, he has to give a lot more support to his family. I think that's probably going to have a bit more resonance with people than some of the speeches and promises coming out from the other leaders.
Yeah, maybe. Owen, thanks very much indeed. I found this isn't exactly what I was looking for before, but I found it's in the Sunday Express. Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey provided plenty of photo opportunities, falling off a paddleboard, plunging down a water slide. One wag suggested he should try being fired out of a cannon, to which the Lib Dem president, Mark Pack, replied, please don't give him any ideas.
But it is almost as though he's just playing for the picture, isn't he?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, I just find it a bit odd. Yeah. I just find it a bit odd. I just want to hear about policies at the minute, and then when you do mention policies, they talk a lot about the sewerage, which is important. But I don't know, is it getting the cut through? What do you think? What do you think? We'd love to have your thoughts on that this morning. Oh, Mick Malone, straight on, saying Ed Davey should answer questions about the post office scandal. Yeah, I mean, every time we have a Lib Dem on, we mention that.
Yes.
And they say, well, look, he has addressed it. He did meet up with...
Portland Reynolds?
No. The guy who brought the case. Name escapes me. It's too early.
Alan Bates.
Alan Bates. But also, when he was asked if he wanted to apologise in that car crash interview a couple of months ago, he just refused. And I think that's where he went wrong.
Yes. And I'll bet you he was advised by a lawyer not to apologise because that implies blame. But there has to be a way to apologise without getting yourself into legal tangle work, because it just looked mealy-mouthed that he wouldn't, didn't it? Do you know that that's another report in the papers today, that the Post Office are going on using the Horizon system for another 5 years. They've still got another 5 years on the contract, and they've announced that they're going to go on using Horizon.
I suppose they've got nothing to switch to, because it'll all have to be built to order. This is the problem, but you wouldn't trust it.
Well, no.
You wouldn't trust it.
And if you were a sub-postmaster or mistress right now, and you're still going to have to use that, how could you possibly trust it? Except that at least we're aware now.
Yes, if anything doesn't add up, at least they're not going to necessarily point the finger at you.
But it just seems crazy, doesn't it?
There you go, it'll change eventually. Right, now, ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we've been sharing the stories of some of the men who risked their lives for our freedom, including today, 98-year-old Alec Penstone. He joined the Royal Navy in 1943, training as a submarine detector.
And for D-Day, his job was to protect the Normandy invasion force by listening out for German U-boats who were trying, of course, to torpedo the Allied fleet.
Will Hollis spoke with Alec at the Union Jack Club in London.
Well, I'm amazed at one thing, that I'm still here, because I certainly didn't expect to be here at my time of life. My life was going to be short, but not very sweet.
Alec Penstone joined the Royal Navy in 1943. The 98-year-old served on the escort aircraft carrier HMS Campania, running supplies to Britain's allies in the Soviet Union. The white beret he wears highlights his role in the Arctic. He spent D-Day 3 decks down, listening for the enemy.
My role was a submarine detector, protecting the fleet going across to Normandy from the attack by U-boats. So therefore the U-boat pens were round at Brest. So I did not land on anywhere. I was just the cover force to protect the invasion fleet going over. Because if they'd have come out and pressed in the numbers that they had, they would have decimated the whole idea of Normandy landings. As it was quite a near thing at some times. They had to come out just below periscope depth where we used to wait for them. We certainly managed to stop them coming out, but unfortunately one managed to get through from the Arctic way and torpedoed one of the ships there with a tremendous loss of life.
80 years on, Alec remembers the sense of duty.
I'm proud of being able to do that rather than sit back and let somebody else do it.
He defended Britain when all seemed lost.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in. It's a long, long waiting Tipperary. We're still around. England, or Britain, still carries on.
Will Hollis, GB News.
Incredible, man. I love the kiss at the end.
Yeah, I know.
Good on him.
Yeah, but he was so young in that picture.
18.
He was just a little lad, really, and doing such an incredible job. Thank goodness he did.
Right, it is 20 minutes past 7. Let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom. And 53 people were arrested after trying to break into Wembley Stadium last night for the Champions League final at Dortmund versus Real Madrid. 5 arrests made for pitch invasion, the rest for breaches of security. Topping off a busy day of policing, the Metropolitan Police deployed more than 2,000 officers across the day because there were other protests and demonstrations in London.
South Africa's ruling political party, the African National Congress, the ANC, has suffered their worst result in 30 years, forcing them into a power-sharing agreement. With almost all votes counted from Wednesday's election, the ANC is now on 40% of the vote, and that really is down from their previous 58%. They've always polled above 50 since the country's first democratic elections in 1994, when, of course, Nelson Mandela became president.
Boeing's highly anticipated space launch was called off last night, just 4 minutes before liftoff, delayed by an automated system which takes over the flight sequence in the last couple of minutes. It was the company's first attempt to fly its Starliner with astronauts on board to the International Space Station.
Right, shall we find out how the weather is treating us? Here's Honor.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we can expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, though there is some cloud across in the northwest. It should be a little bit mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland, though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we'll start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over Western Hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here, but elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy, a few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon it should be largely dry, just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later, and it will be brightening up across Scotland, and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, it's officially summer, and we've got a brand new summer giveaway for you. £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. We're throwing in a brand new iPhone, AirPods and £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. So if you fancy all of that, here are the details you need.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Do stay with us, some fascinating stuff coming up, because there are new breakthroughs in cancer treatment which could transform treatment and actually prevent thousands of cases of cancer. We'll be looking at that next. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
It's 7:29 now. 2 new medical developments could turn the tide on cancers and some of the treatments.
Well, a very easy at-home saliva test could identify men at risk of developing aggressive prostate cancer. And there's also a new blood test we're hearing of today, which may be able to predict the risk of something like breast cancer returning, apparently 3 years before any tumour showed up.
Let's talk to Dr. David Lloyd, who's the GP on the NHS. Good to see you this morning, David. First of all, what can you tell us about this prostate test? Because we know it's a huge problem for men, prostate cancer, but we also know we're a little bit reluctant to go and get anything checked out.
Yes, I think that is the major problem with men, isn't it? But I think this is a very exciting development, and as you say, it's a relatively simple test, and it does seem to pick up a lot of men with prostate cancer. The problem we've got with the traditional testing, which is the PSA test, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is a blood test, is that it picks up a lot of people who haven't got prostate cancer and subjects them to quite invasive tests, which is a biopsy of your prostate. Things have got a little better since then. We've now got MRIs, which are very good at detecting prostate cancer and can sometimes alleviate the need to have a biopsy and make the diagnosis. So this new test is very exciting, and it promises to help men recover and live longer with prostate cancer. Because I don't know whether you know, but if you were to contrast prostate cancer with, say, breast cancer, which we're also going to talk about, I think the research is about 5 years behind on prostate cancer than it is with breast cancer. And us men have had a pretty raw deal of it. So it's a good thing that we're getting more tests and that we're detecting more prostate cancer. And one final point, there is an enormous study just starting in England at the moment, which is going to be looking at this in great detail and try and sort out what the best screening tests are for prostate cancer. And I would just make a special plea for black men over the age of 45. We know that black and Afro-Caribbean men have a much higher incidence and much poorer outcomes on prostate cancer. So if you are a black man living in England and you're over 45, please consider going to see your GP straight away and either getting enrolled in this research or getting a test that your GP can do, because that's the group that's really suffering at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at prostate and breast cancer, they're the 2 most common cancers with their gender, aren't they?
They are, and very, very similar in their incidence, and yet women do much better than men.
Well, you look at the breast cancer then, if you've already had breast cancer, obviously there's always a risk of recurrence. But this new breakthrough, which is a DNA is it a blood test? Yes. Yeah. It could actually look at the possibility of recurrence and detect it much, much earlier than we can do at present.
Yes, I think this is very exciting, isn't it? So this is a different group. This is women who've already had cancer and had treatment and are technically in remission. And it's picking up women who might recur. And this is a very exciting thing. And I think I think these research studies reflect that we're now getting better at testing some very specific parts of the DNA in human beings so that we can detect these things. And I think we're going to see more and more of these studies coming out. And it's no coincidence that both of these studies have come out this week, because there's an enormous conference going on where everybody who's very expert in cancer are talking about these things. So yes, I think this is a very exciting thing. One of the problems I have as a GP is when women come to see me years after they've had a cancer diagnosis and they've got some vague symptoms. And how do you decide whether to do more tests or not, or reassure or get further opinions? So this will be a useful thing for us on the front line.
But what is, if you can detect that you are more likely to recur within several years, what advantage does that give you as a medical professional, or indeed as a patient? Are there treatments available which can then reduce that recurrence likelihood?
Yes, I think that's one of the things we're discovering now is that it isn't just a one-off thing. You have your treatment for cancer, and then it either recurs and you get problems, or it doesn't. We now have good treatments that we can give on people who've got recurrence of disease. And it means that if we catch this earlier, we can be more specific in getting the right treatments for those sorts of recurrences.
Now, we've just mentioned these two breakthroughs, and you said prepare for more, which is wonderful news, really. Lots of people are going to be listening to you thinking, what do I do then? What do I do? Do I get hold of my GP now and ask for one of these tests?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. You've made a very important point there. No, these tests are not going to be available yet for maybe several years. But I think the study that I'm talking about, the Transform study, is definitely available in my area. And so I think if you're a man with either prostate symptoms or are worried about your family history of prostate cancer, I think get down to your GP and have a good chat about it, because we've got some exciting new things we might be able to offer.
No, good advice. Get down there and see what you can sort out. Dr. Lloyd, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
And maybe end up being part of a study.
Well, you know, that'd be great, wouldn't it? I think there's a lot to be said for being involved in studies like that.
Yes, I do.
But it's just that thing of getting down to the doctor and saying, especially for men, you know, even if you haven't got any symptoms, as a doctor said there, if you've got a family history, or if you're over the age of 45 and you've got a sort of black Afro-Caribbean heritage, then
the
you
incidence
are much
is
more
much
likely. Then you get it checked out. Just preemptively go.
Yeah. I mean, what should our attitude be about men who are just a bit embarrassed to go to the doctor? Should you say, "Oh, diddums, just go," or? I mean, a lot of women will say, well, we women have had to be poked and prodded around by the doctor forever. But,
I mean, different for men.
Why is it?
It's different for men. It's just...
No, I accept that it is, because it's clearly a problem that has to be addressed. But why? Why are you shy?
I don't know. I think men feel much more vulnerable, whereas I think women are put in a vulnerable position because of childbirth, and you get prodded and poked.
Yeah, you get used to it.
You know, used to losing.
You don't get to like it, but you do get used to it.
Yeah. So I think there's an element. I think there's an element of that. I don't know. I don't know, but it is difficult. But you just got to crack it. I think you got to be firm. If you've got a.
It's better than losing your life.
Yeah, if you've got a man at home who's a bit like that, then just.
Well, they always say, don't they, men tend to do better health-wise if they've got a woman around them. They do, because women will nag and nag and nag.
You've got to get on with it. Men will suffer, and they'll do a lot of moaning. I mean, they're terrible patients, most men. Terrible patients.
Yeah.
But what can you do? But yeah, get down to the GP. Right, on that note, we're going to take a short break, but we're going to be back very shortly with all your sports news with Aidan McGee.
Join me, Camila Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom.
When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News, weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again. It's 20 minutes to 8 already, and Aidan is here with the sport.
Good morning to you both.
Hello.
Morning. I want to touch on the security issue at Wembley. I'm not going to go big on it because I'm loath to give these people any kind of traction when we saw a great game on the pitch yesterday. But needless to say, some fans were seen storming Wembley, Wembley, the corporate areas and the turnstiles last night. 53 arrests. The Met say they had spent £5 million in a ring of steel. They had 2,000 police officers on site. I'm sure there'll be more recriminations in the coming days, but I want to put that to one side just for now, just because, as I say, there was a decent game on the pitch last night. Real Madrid deserve every credit for achieving their 15th Champions League title. Carlo Ancelotti, 5th just by himself as a coach, 2 of those with AC Milan. Great night for Jude Bellingham as well. He set up the second goal. And I think that's great for Gareth Southgate with the Euro starting in what, 2 weeks' time. That's another young player, age 20, who's got a Champions League winners medal under his belt, which is absolutely fantastic because it means that when you're looking for players, and Gareth Southgate's always talking about this, players with big game, trophy-winning experience. That's another one in the squad now.
He's got trophy-winning experience at the age of 20.
It's very rare. It's very rare. It is. It's that kind of pedigree, particularly for England players in the last 20 years or so. For Dortmund, once again, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. They lost in 2013 against their bitter rivals, Bayern Munich. They hadn't won the tournament since 1997.
I'm told they were the better players for the first half.
Oh, they were, yeah, without doubt. Yeah, this is it. I mean, look, top-level football, if you look at the score, I'm not hugely surprised by the outcome. 2-0 to Real Madrid. Most people would have predicted that. That's probably what I'd have said if I'd made a prediction, but I've stopped making predictions lately just because my record's a bit checkered. But had they scored those first two chances in the first half, we'd have been looking at a very, very different game. But they were very colourful, the supporters were very, very resplendent in their luminous yellow shirts, and I saw a few of them on the train yesterday. I was chatting to a few of them at Victoria and Paddington and elsewhere.
I saw some driving home yesterday.
Yeah, but it's different. You can confuse them with the police, can't you?
From a distance.
But they said the
does,
tickets were like gold dust in Germany. They were paying £1,000. They were changing hands for.
What about? I do feel a bit sorry for Jadon Sancho, because it would have been quite nice to shove a couple of fingers up at Ten Hag.
Well, I think I think we'll talk about Ten Hag in a minute, actually. But I do think that he's kind of done that already. I mean, he got to a Champions League final, having been bombed out of the door in January. United didn't really do much on the pitch in terms of the domestic programme in the Premier League, but they did win the FA Cup. Nonetheless, I think Jadon Sancho has proved himself. He might well go back to Manchester United in the summer, an improved player. And on Eric Ten Hag, he's been giving an interview saying that they've blown £400 million of Man United's cash since he took over 2 years ago, but the players' failure and the money spent on those players is actually not his fault. So he's probably feeling a little bit empowered, because he could argue, well, I won a trophy last season, the Carabao Cup, and I won the FA Cup this time. Maybe he's earned the right to kind of defend himself, but big money signings, Anthony, £80 million. Casemiro, flattered to deceive, a player at very much at the end of his career. Rasmus Højlund, blown hot and cold. Mason Mount, constantly injured. Andrea Onana, the goalkeeper, error-strewn performances. It's time that they showed improvement, those players. He's got to get the best out of them. That's his job. But Richard Arnold is taking the blame, and the other guy who's outgoing, John Murtagh. It's interesting that the guys who leave at top level, they're the ones who get the blame. But crucially, this is the first summer that Ineos and Sir James Radcliffe have had with their feet under the table. They're undergoing a strategic review, and still we don't know if your prediction of Eric Ten Hag leaving is going to come true. But I think with the FA Cup win last week, he's probably strengthened himself a bit. I just don't think it looks good in front of fans when you're blaming other people for that money being spent.
No, can we just finish off on this shocking undercover thing from the Sunday Times, who've discovered that drinking at darts matches is a problem?
No, this is players.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's meant to be...
I mean, darts players, you see him walking up to the hockey with a pint in one hand and a dart in the other.
How do you know what the hockey is? You never not know about darts?
I know about darts. I'm a northerner. Come on.
Well, look, remember when we were kids, when in the heyday of darts, you'd see them drinking a pint.
They'd have a pint in one hand and a dart.
Andy Fordham, one of the first tournaments I covered in 2004, a Dartford resident, no less, where we were the other week.
Great man.
He used to drink 20 pints before a match, and that was true. And he had an outrageous diet as well.
Just to steady his nerves.
Yeah, he won the title, so you can't knock it, I suppose. But now with the PDC and these are great times for darts. I mean, you know, the ticket prices, ticket sales are through the roof. I mean, Luke Littler's been appearing on chat shows in America. I mean, we're talking... The Sunday Times are doing a report on darts in June. We've never seen that before, ever, in the history of the sport. So, I don't think so, anyway. But there have been instances recorded of players not, in all seriousness, not living the best of lifestyles in terms of their drink consumption. The PDC are trying to move the image of darts away from it because sponsors like clean-cut athletes, if you like, and players have been seen. One player had to be placed in a recovery position outside a PDC Pro Tour venue in Wigan. Another player was passed out in his chair in the practice room where photography is prohibited. So that's where you go if you're a bit worse for wear, because you know you're not going to be papped.
Yeah.
But what they're going to do about this, I think when you're on the hockey as well, when you're on the hockey and you're looking back and you see all those people having fun, you probably want to get involved, don't you? You might have a swig.
What's the hockey?
The hockey, it's where you stand to throw your position.
Ask Stevie, he knows all about the hockey.
In one! No, yeah, brilliant stuff. All right, Aidan, we'll see you a little bit later on.
Newspapers next.
Join me, Camila Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camila Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol. I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption. But revealed, alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, time for the papers this morning with the writer and journalist, Angie Jones, and the political consultant, Suzanne Evans. Good to see you both this morning. Let's have a look at the Sunday Mirror, should we, Andy? No dirty tricks in this campaign, says who?
It says Angela Rayner. She who has suffered maybe a dirty trick already with all of the investigation after investigation into her own property situation, which she's been found not guilty of. Angela Rayner insists, as Deputy Leader, they won't be whacking anyone like John Prescott did, and they definitely won't be any dirty tricks, which I think will last all of about 5 minutes. I think by the time that that newspaper's in the recycling, there'll already be some dirty tricks. But she just make the...
Well, I hope she's right. I hope she's right. I get fed up with dirty tricks in politics.
Oh, but there's so many of them. You know, I remember when David Cameron became Prime Minister in 2010, he said, I'm going to put an end to Punch and Judy politics. Well, we're still waiting, aren't we? It didn't happen. But I'm sorry, I think this is a bit rich of Angela Rayner. Really? Well, what did she call the Conservatives? A four-letter word beginning with S. Wasn't very nice. She called Boris racist, misogynist, homophobic, which, say what you like about Boris, he is none of those things. Yeah, so I think it's a bit rich, really.
And also to say we're not going to do any John Prescott stuff. I mean, John Prescott, most people feel, was quite justified in doing what he did.
You'll have to be...
He did defend himself.
He'd just been egged, hadn't he? And he did what John Prescott-type people do, and he just fought back.
Yeah, I don't blame him for that.
No, I don't blame him for it.
Quite absolutely, absolutely. I think it was a sort of tongue-in-cheek remark on the campaign trail. But she does make the valid point about, you know, wasting police time. I mean, how many police officers were investigating her property affairs when people in the local area will be ringing up for burglaries and such and not getting a response?
Oh, well, yeah, but...
I don't know. Well, yeah, she's been found innocent.
Yeah, so that's all
we can say.
Yeah. That's all you can say.
Yeah, she had a lot of flack.
Let's have a look at this story in the Express, Suzanne. We were just talking about it a minute ago, actually, but looking at recurrence of breast cancer.
Yeah, I saw your interview. Now, I'm someone who's had breast cancer. I had breast cancer 7 years ago. I hope, touch wood, I'm completely recovered. But every year before I go for my annual mammogram now, I think this might be my last one, but, you know, it's like you're always a little bit on tenterhooks. And so I read this story with great interest this morning because I think a test that could predict whether you were likely to have it. On the one hand, I think that's great because then you can get preventative treatment and, of course, prevention and early detection is everything. On the other hand, you think, is it just another layer of worry to add? sad. But I think this is incredible, actually, because I've known a lot of women who have had breast cancer and they have had a recurrence. And, anything I think that can help to pick this up has got to be good
what
news.
is also very encouraging is the big cancer charities in Britain at the moment are doing such incredible work on these very things. And every so often you hear that there's another breakthrough in treatment. And they really are working very hard at trying to make things simpler, trying to detect much more early.
Yeah.
And that, as we know, is the key.
There was a breakthrough with lung cancer as well announced this week, and wasn't it? In a 5-year study, they've managed to slow the growth of lung cancers in people who've been diagnosed with lung cancer.
Apologies, I've just got to say, apologies for the beeping if you can hear it at home.
Why? Yes.
It's my insulin pump, which is telling me I need to change the pump in 12 hours.
Oh, in 12 hours?
12.
Oh, all right.
Give me a little bit of warning. So that's
good.
Early warning systems, that's what we're talking about.
So look, we're talking about health, so
Yes,
it's appropriate.
But that's the other thing, is I mean, the advances that have been made in the treatment of diabetes 1.
Oh,
I mean, it's incredible, isn't it?
There's more to come.
Yeah.
In
the olden days, you'd have had to be doing blood tests.
But so many people still are doing finger prick tests, and they're so outdated now.
Good. I love this next story.
God, at home with the Rees-Moggs.
Yes.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg is in talks to star in his own reality show. Mogglebox, I assume it's going to be called. But you may have seen we've had all sorts of reality TV shows, haven't we? Tyson Fury at home with the Furies, the boxing champion, and he's very large and out there family. His would be, Jacob Rees-Mogg's one would be very similar to that, large family.
I don't think it would.
Similar to that.
I think it would.
Well, I was going to say
production, you mean?
similar in production,
Yeah.
but very, very different in terms of what they're up to.
But I mean, they are an interesting family. There's no doubt about this. And if he loses his seat, he's going to need some income.
Yeah, I'd imagine that because Jacob Rees-Mogg is very much the voice of the family. I'm not sure we know too much about.
Oh no,
I wouldn't say that.
His sister is very vocal.
And his wife is absolutely lovely, charming. Who doesn't want to have breakfast with Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Absolutely. I think this would be an absolute
I can't remember where it was, but I was reading in one of the other Sunday papers this morning about how much of a bit of a heartthrob Jacob Rees-Mogg is and how attractive he is to many women.
Really?
Jacob Rees-Mogg, I mean, I've seen him speak umpteen times. He is mobbed wherever he goes by both men and women.
Well, there you go. On that, I can see you getting slightly hot under the collar, so I'm going to just call time on that now before we get carried away. We'll see you two later. Here's the weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we can expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, though there is some cloud across in the northwest. It should be a little bit mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland, though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we'll start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over western hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here, but elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy, a few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon it should be largely dry, just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later, and it will be brightening up across Scotland and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got summer sewn up with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. Fun in the sun could be on us. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat zone.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now, more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Good morning, 8 o'clock, Sunday the 2nd of June. Today, the Battle Bus campaign gets underway as Rishi Sunak faces another poll blow. Sir Keir Starmer is all set to tackle net migration.
It's 30 years since the RAF Chinook helicopter crash in the Mull of Kintyre, you may remember, but the families of the victims are still searching for answers about what happened.
So there is no doubt there was something wrong with the craft.
We'll continue our series of D-Day veteran stories as we run up to the 80th anniversary of the landings later this week. Today, Will Hollis has been talking to 98-year-old Alec Penstone.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in.
And David Beckham and the King have joined forces because they have bonded over bees.
It was Real Madrid who once again triumphed in the Champions League final as their win over Borussia Dortmund gave them a record-extending 15th title at Wembley. Elsewhere, the boxing saw a one-sided 5 versus 5 in Saudi, while Novak Djokovic left it late. Or should that be early to prevail in Paris?
Well, there's going to be plenty of warm sunshine across the country today, though a little bit cloudier across the northwest with some rain and drizzle, and a bit cooler here too. So stay tuned for all your latest weather updates.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Right, let's crack on with some election news now, because there's been more bad news for the Prime Minister. Labour's lead in the polls has grown to a new high, not seen since Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
Yesterday, however, both leaders started their day by launching the all-important campaign battle buses. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
It's great to be here for the launch of the bus, Angela's bus. And it's rather like Tory defectors. You wait for ages and then 3 come along in a row. But this one, Ange, I'm reliably told, has got a fridge in the back of it. So check that Boris Johnson isn't in there. He used to be around these parts.
Is that he doesn't stick by anything he says, just constantly changes his mind. And it's clear that Angela Rayner is in charge of the Labour Party and not him at the end of the day. And if he's given in to her and the left on that, imagine what he'll give into when it comes to higher taxes, the union's demands, or weakening our defence and security.
What's important is that the SNP goes to this election to win it, and that's what we're about. We're going into this election to win it.
Tories are on their way out. That's a clear message. But Labour's taking Wales for granted is something that I'm hearing on doorsteps in every part of Wales. So it's Plaid Cymru that's able to say, no, there is another place for you to put your vote that can keep the Tories out, keep Labour in check, and that's Plaid Cymru that will always stand up for Wales.
And after what they promised people in 2019, we now don't believe a single word that they said. What Reform have to do is to say to people who agree with our policies, come out and vote for us.
Well, today the Prime Minister will pledge an extra £1 billion a year to try to increase the number of GP appointments in the UK.
And Sir Keir Starmer is set to tackle the tricky topic of immigration as he announces plans to cut net migration as questions are raised over whether Labour is offering peerages to some MPs to step down.
Lib Dems are focusing on the NHS, promising to reverse Tory cuts to the health system.
And the SNP will launch their Westminster campaign as the leader, John Swinney, promises to put Scotland's interests first.
Well, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, has been around the country over the last few days. She's here. Now, welcome home.
Fresh off the bus. Maybe not very fresh. I got in at midnight.
Oh.
Is the bus here in London now, or is it still touring somewhere?
It was in London, but they keep its location, obviously, very secret. But, yes, it was a blur. We set off on Friday, losing track of the days, went up to the northwest. The Prime Minister, Northwest Friday. Prime Minister was on a farm, a heritage railway. We had ice creams, a lovely day. Went across then to the northeast, and yesterday in Blythe and somewhere else.
Yes, isn't that funny?
It's just a blur, but basically he's been going to seats that the Conservatives already have that are either considered safe, probably no such thing at the moment, or they're sort of red wall seats that they took in 2019 that they're now in danger of losing.
I'm intrigued. There's a new poll out today. The Prime Minister's going to be pushing on the NHS and sort of more GP appointments by farming more stuff out to pharmacists, which has got its own potential to be problematic. However, I just wonder, in the midst of all this and your time on the bus, what the mood has been like.
The mood, and it sounds strange to say this, given those horrendous polls for the Conservatives yesterday and then more dropping last night that were more recent, he still seems, and I've been with him a lot over the last month, very positive, energetic and upbeat, despite these horrific projections. And his team, and I think something that both he and Starmer have in common, they've got a very tight team of people around them that really do believe in them and what they're trying to do and are prepared to work insanely hard. So his team too, I mean, you know, they seem upbeat. Of course they're going to put their best foot forward for journalists, but, you know, he genuinely seems energetic. But, you know, they would be wanting the polls to begin to shift, and of course the line is always only poll that matters is the general election. But, you know, the MRP poll, that had been done a bit earlier, but the ones coming out last night had been done during the last week, where you might have thought that Labour's problems over Diane Abbott's, Angela Rayner, division, etc., might have started to factor in, and also some of these big announcements on national service, the pension triple lock plus, might have started to shift the polls, and there's no sign of that happening yet. So I think that will be a concern. Also, they are having some difficulties in raising money. Funding is an issue. They're trying to get more donations, and so it's certainly not easy for them, but they seem still very upbeat.
Do you travel as a unit? I mean, do you press guys kip upstairs or something?
So what happened with this bus, because the first day we weren't on the new bus was unveiled yesterday. It was basically sort of core press, so different media organisations, and then I think they had one print journalist who was doing an interview, and then we stay somewhere for the night. The Prime Minister was stayed at home that night. Then you all go on. The Prime Minister was on the bus. It was unveiled in Redcar. Then he was on the bus, went up to Blythe. It's interesting watching the sort of scrum around him, because he gets off the bus, and of course it's a lovely day at the seaside. People are not expecting to see him, and he's walking along, and he was pretty well received, people with kids, dogs, veterans wanting a picture. But then there's this scrum as he walks around, and the press and everyone chasing him and cameras. There was a couple just sitting just behind the seaside, sort of having a picnic on their chairs. And they were like, what's going on? And then I heard a passerby say to one of them, do you want to get a picture with him? And the woman just went, no. It's like, plenty of people did. But it's like a whirlwind just descends on somewhere, and people can't quite believe it.
Because some politicians are very, very good at it, this sort of electioneering, campaigning, meeting people, and they have boundless energy. Is Rishi Sunak a natural?
I don't think either of them they're not natural orators, but he is very good one-to-one, talking to people. He's very friendly, he's very, very chatty, very happy to have pictures. Etc. I haven't seen Sir Keir Starmer in that setting, because at the moment Labour are being super, super careful, of course, because they've got this huge poll lead. Their events are being very, very tightly controlled. It'll be interesting to see if and when he starts going out, wandering around towns, talking to ordinary people.
Talking of Labour, I mean, they're pushing today on immigration. Now, this is it's a difficult one for any party, but I think particularly for Labour. But they're saying net migration, which is all the legal stuff, but it needs to be brought down. But they won't put any figures on it, no targets.
No targets. And I did an interview for GB News with Sir Keir Starmer last Monday, in which he also said we must stop the boats. But there's no actual specific pledge to do that. I guess
they've seen the dangers of that.
Rishi Sunak be burnt by saying we'll stop the boats, and also the Conservatives by saying net migration to the tens of thousands, while it's gone up to 750,000. So, yeah, I mean, they're saying this, and I think, given that it's currently, 685,000, it's not really a difficult pledge to make. It may reassure some people that are toying with voting Labour that they intend to get a grip on this. But the reality is that the measures that the government brought in are going to reduce net migration by the autumn. So there's some thoughts that the numbers will be down very significantly by the autumn anyway.
So we can
but Labour will be able to say, look.
Yeah, we did it, yeah.
So,
that's very politics.
It's politics,
it is. You know it's going to happen.
Can I just ask about Ed Davey? What's he up to?
Oh, well...
Because we're mystified.
He probably needs a bit... Do you mean what's he up to yesterday? What's he up to with the stunts?
What's he up to doing stunts all the time?
I think it's just about getting some media attention, because he's told me before, you know, they just can't get the coverage in normal circumstances. And by, falling off a paddleboard, the next day he was going down on a bike down a steep slope, and then to top it all, the water slide.
He's clearly enjoying himself.
It gets coverage. But I think there is a question, isn't there? Because it's getting him a lot of coverage. They're obviously having a whale of a time, but of course they're there to talk about policy announcements. I think the other day they've been talking about free school meals for all primary children. They've been talking about mental health support, but I do wonder whether that might be being drowned out a bit.
I sort of think that, I mean, the problem I have with it is that you see clips, we played a clip of him earlier on, and it's a very serious, this is what we're going to do, this is how we want to approach it all. It's a very serious interview, but then everything else, he's sort of laughing like a teenager.
Yeah.
You know, on a play day sort of thing. And the two just don't seem to marry up.
Yes, and of course, there's still a lot of people... plenty of people still don't know who he is, frankly. And there's plenty of people that do know who he is, and maybe he came to their attention first with the Post Office scandal. Of course, there are many, many people who probably didn't behave well during that, but he is one that sort of sticks out. I think yesterday he was taking a day off. He's got a very severely disabled son. I think he put a tweet out saying that he's, you know, that's his sort of most important job, which he'll probably get a bit of credit for that.
Yeah, well, you know, fair enough.
Well, yes.
Fair enough. Catherine, thank you. We shall see you a little bit later on.
Yes, and so the election is what? Are we in day 9?
No, but day 11, I think, are we? 11?
What day is it?
You don't know. It's Sunday.
All I know is the election is in 4.5 weeks.
It is day 11, apparently.
Day 11, there you go. Oh,
quite a few more to go. Right, it's 12 minutes past 8. 30 years ago, today, an RAF Chinook helicopter crashed into the side of a mountain in Scotland.
Well, on board, 4 crew, 25 of the UK's senior Northern Ireland intelligence and counter-terrorism experts.
And today, the families of those who lost their lives have launched a campaign for justice, accusing the Ministry of Defence of a cover-up.
Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has the story.
As he kissed her goodbye with...
Ian Phoenix was in charge of a counter-terrorism group dedicated to bringing peace to Northern Ireland. He was a husband and a father.
He was a real Irishman. He had the twinkly Irish eyes. He enjoyed a good joke. He liked a good glass of wine.
Susan Phoenix first heard of the accident that killed her husband on her car radio.
I was just driving along going, no, no, no. I can still see it. I can still feel it, even 30 years on.
On the 2nd of June, 1994, the Chinook helicopter that was taking them to a peace conference crashed into the side of a mountain on the Mull of Kintyre, killing 4 crew and 25 of the country's top counter-terrorism experts. At a board of inquiry, the Ministry of Defence concluded there was no doubt whatsoever the accident had been caused by the gross negligence of the 2 pilots, Flight Lieutenants Richard Cook and Jonathan Tapper. But there was doubt. Plenty of it.
Something had gone badly wrong because they flew into the side of a mountain, but they were trying to the very last to pull up the nose and they couldn't. So there is no doubt there was something wrong with the craft.
There were no eyewitnesses on that foggy night, no flight data recorder, no voice recorder. It took until 2011 for the Ministry of Defence to admit they had not a shred of evidence. The Defence Secretary at the time, Liam Fox, exonerated the pilots and apologised to their families.
I have written to the widows of the 2 pilots, to the father of Jonathan Tapper and to the brother of Richard Cook to express the Ministry of Defence's apology for the distress which was caused to them by the findings of negligence.
But if the pilots didn't cause the crash, what did? At the time of the crash, systematic errors in the software that controlled the engines had been reported. In fact, the MOD were in a legal dispute with the manufacturers of this software, a fact that wasn't shared with the inquiry. David Hill was an aeronautical engineer for the MOD at the time. He says the MOD had seen its safety budget slashed in the run-up to the accident.
But the evidence doesn't lie. People do. We've got hard copy reports, documents saying the aircraft is not airworthy. You are not permitted to fly it.
In a statement, the Ministry of Defence told GB News, in 2010, the Mull of Kintyre independent review was carried out and the findings were fully accepted. The review did not find new evidence to suggest mechanical failure, and no safety issues with the Chinook Mark II were raised in the report. This weekend, the families have formed the Chinook Justice Campaign. But justice may never come. The MOD's file on the accident has been locked away and can't be made public for 100 years.
Why would you lock up a document unless it was going to incriminate somebody? It just does not make sense.
To the families, it smacks of a cover-up at the very top of the establishment. They're hoping they can persuade the MOD to unlock the files, unlock the secrets, so they can finally know what happened on that foggy mountain 30 years ago. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Still a mystery, I suppose, isn't it, that those particular documents won't be available for another 100 years?
Will they have the answer, though?
They
That's the
probably
problem.
won't.
I mean,
It'll just be names that we don't know.
If you're looking at something like that, and this is the horrific thing about it, where there's obviously no witnesses there on the Mull of Kintyre, there's no black box, no data recorder, so how do you actually prove anything? And the reality is you can't. Which is why it was such a scandal that they decided to blame pilot error back in the day. Thank heavens that was rescinded back in 2010.
Can I tell you about another mystery that I've just been reading about? Exactly 100 years ago this week, a young man called George Mallory rang his mother, and in fact he wrote to his mother saying, "I'm leaving for the summit of Everest quite soon." And as we know, we've never been able to really know whether he and his companion, Andrew Irvine, actually made it to the top of Everest. But it is thought that they did summit Everest, and then on the way down, they both fell to their deaths. And if you remember, in 1999, they found his body.
Oh, did
Do you remember? Yeah.
Perfectly preserved, probably.
Perfectly preserved, yes. Even there were labels inside his jumper that showed it was his, and things like that. But as they do on Everest, they left the bodies when they found them there in 1999. They left his body there. It's disappeared.
You're joking?
No. Another research team has been sending up drones and things like that. They know exactly where that body was, but it's gone. And it's not been covered in snow or anything, because it doesn't snow in that particular part. It's gone. It's gone. And they think it was a Chinese team who were sent to get rid, to literally get rid of the body, because of the scandal. There was a growing scandal about how many bodies have been left on Everest.
Right.
And they think it was a Chinese team who were preparing for the Olympics and wanted to sort of clean up various areas so that there wouldn't be any bad publicity. Isn't that weird?
It is weird. Mind you, I don't like all the bodies on Everest.
No, I don't either, and there's nothing
fair,
they can really do about it.
No.
It's too dangerous to recover some of them.
But it is a strange idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, oh well.
Sorry, I just thought I'd
it's worth
give you another mystery.
It's quite a good one. Right, let's see what the weather's going to do. Here's Honor.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we can expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, so there is some cloud across in the northwest. There should be a little bit of mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we'll start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over Western Hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here. But elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then, we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall, a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy. A few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon, it should be largely dry. Just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later. And it will be brightening up across Scotland, and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, believe it or not, it apparently is officially summer.
It is.
So we've got a brand new summer giveaway. It's £15,000 in cash. If you won that, it would make a pretty good summer, wouldn't it? We're also chucking in a brand new iPhone, AirPods and £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. So you might want to go to a theme park or go to a spa day or something like that. Anyway, you can't win it if you're not in it, so here's how.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Right, still to come for you, David Beckham and the King bond over bees. I'll tell you more in a minute.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
What about the elections? Because it seems that the King and everything is moving because of it, and we've got a lot of royal engagements and things that happen at this time.
Yes, well, you know, it means that he has to take more time and be at home. He can't go to all the things he wants to do. He's been doing 5 a day, which is probably made Camilla a bit cross. But what they still hope is that they can get the Japanese Emperor and Empress over. That's in July. That they can go to France for the 80th anniversary of the fighting. And he will be able to do 1 or 2 things, and Ascot he's very keen to do. Now, those aren't things that are political in any way. Just want to talk about Harry and Charles's argument, where Harry said he didn't want to stay, he wanted to go to a hotel. And it's come out now that actually King Charles is believed that he was put into, offered St James's, and Princess Anne stays there and Beatrice stays there.
And this was for when Harry came over for his 10th
yeah, exactly. And the policemen are wandering around with guns, and there's no chance of actually there being any problem there. So the fact that he said that it wasn't safe for him was not actually a very sensible thing to say, I don't think.
Well, he went to Nigeria, and that is, in the world ranking, it's ranked as quite a dangerous place.
Yes, one of the dangerous places in the world. But now Harry and Meghan have been invited to go to Ghana.
Oh, God. Well, it's interesting because my parents are from Ghana. I have Ghanaian heritage, and I'm thinking she'll probably then claim there's a percentage that she's Ghanaian as well. I'll be like, hang on a minute, you were Maltese, you're also Nigerian,
and
now you're going to say you're Ghanaian and German.
Yeah.
Come on. Thank you very much.
Squeeze it in.
Yeah, let's get them all in. Angela Levin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The People's Channel. Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, David Beckham has been named the latest ambassador of the King's Foundation, the monarch's new charity.
Yes, David Beckham and the King, or Chaz and Dave.
Oh, give over. Is that what the papers have... You didn't come out with this?
No, I didn't. It's one of the papers, I think. It might even be the Express, I think. Chaz and Dave, yeah. Well, they met in private last month and they swapped beekeeping tips. They found that they were both very keen on bees and honey.
What do you call beekeepers? There's a term, isn't there? Beekeepers.
It's...
No, I can't find it now.
It's...
Honey farm. Apiarists.
Apiarists, that's it, yeah.
There you go, it's worth the wait.
They're both interested in apiary,
yes,
apparently.
Sherlock Holmes was as well. Well, I mean,
Well, there you are.
He wasn't real, obviously. There you go.
Thank you for making that
apparently, David became an apiarist during lockdown, and he's since posted videos of himself working on his hives. Sounds painful. And in May last year, he presented the monarch with a jar of his own honey.
And it all went down very well, apparently, which means that Charles has now made David the ambassador for the King's Foundation.
It's not what David wanted to be made by the King.
No, I know, but they're bonding. They're bonding. Joining us now is the former royal correspondent for The Sun, Charles Ray. Hello there, Charles.
Good morning.
I must say, the meeting has resulted in a fantastic picture.
Fabulous picture, and there are other pictures of David actually meeting some of the young people who benefit from the King's Foundation. I mean, you mentioned Chaz and Dave a little more. I prefer the other two, which was Beck's Signs for Palace, and also he's become the bee's knees.
Of course, very good. Yes. Actually, the King's Foundation, is that the charity that was previously the Prince's Trust?
No, the Prince's Trust is still there. It's the King's Foundation moves up a league because Prince William still has the Prince's Foundation. So the King's Foundation has always been there. It was always called something else, but it's now the King's Foundation.
Right. This is quite interesting, though, and then I hate to bring it all up, but obviously the Beckhams were quite close to Prince Harry.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a little bit interesting in that sense, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, let's not forget that Harry and particularly Meghan accused Victoria of doing something that she shouldn't have done, whatever. Beckham denied it. Obviously, Beckham came to the defence of his wife. So that relationship, has gone, out of the window. But, I mean, Beckham's got a fabulous relationship with the King, and he has certainly got a fabulous relationship with William and Catherine. So, losing one royal is not going to be a problem for the Beckhams.
A lot of people scratch their heads over this and can't figure out why David Beckham hasn't already been knighted. But clearly this is a sort of step closer to that, is it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he has made no secret of the fact that he hopes one day to be Sir David Beckham, and rightly so in my view. I think he's a fabulous guy. I think he was a fantastic footballer. I mean, whenever you see him on a chat show, and he did that Netflix program with him and his family. It's a fabulous program. Showed the behind the scenes and everything else. And if you remember that lovely little scene where Victoria was talking about her school days, and he came out the corner and says, "Yeah, tell them about the Rolls Royce you were driven to school in." I think they're a really nice family, and I hope that Beckham gets his knighthood. Now, the first chance of him getting a knighthood could be as early as next week, because we're going to have the birthday honours list being coming out. Maybe not. Maybe it'll have to wait for the New Year's honours list. But I think Beckham will eventually get that well-deserved knighthood.
Well, I suppose if he was on the birthday honours list, he'd know about it by now.
Yeah, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't
He's not going to tell you or me.
No, he wouldn't tell us. No, but I agree with you though. I think it would be a good thing to do. I think he's a great ambassador for this country, and actually a good boost for the King's Foundation. Actually, to get some high-profile names on board like this it's very good for promoting that work.
He is the first ambassador of the King's kingship, if you like. So there's going to be others in the pipeline, but he's the first one appointed by the King for this since he became king.
Yeah, and he's got that star quality that will... he actually gets the job done, we know that already, but he's got the star quality that just makes the King's Foundation seem more relevant to young people.
Yes, I think if you've got David Beckham on board, you know, your organisation, then, you know, you're well ahead of the game. I mean, because I can't believe anybody doesn't like David Beckham. He is just, as Stephen said, that he's just such a fabulous ambassador, not just for the King's Foundation, but for this country as a whole.
Yeah. Well, we agree. We'll be cheering him on when that knighthood arrives. Charles, great to see you. Thank you very much
indeed.
indeed.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd love to see him with a knighthood.
Me too. I think he deserves it.
I think loads of sports people get these fancy honours when I don't know why. But for him, it's like, come on.
He's done so much for the country, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, not just in football, but of course, there's no doubt that he worked so hard with Prince William to get us the Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
And delivered it, and that was wonderful.
And he's had the longevity of it all.
Yeah.
Which is, I have met him. And
well,
yeah, I have met
him.
it. It was a long time ago now, but I was really impressed with just how down to earth he was. I mean, he just seemed really. It was David Beckham, and he did just seem really normal. But I only spent about 30 seconds with him, you know. But you get a sense.
Yeah.
And I was impressed. I just thought he seemed like a really nice bloke.
But that's because I think both he and Victoria come from nice families.
Yeah.
You know, they just do. It's I used to do a radio programme in the morning, and his dad used to ring up regularly.
Really?
Yeah. If David was... It wasn't just about David being in the news, though. Anything he used to ring up. I mean, it was just charming and lovely. Like I said, you don't like to use the word ordinary, but you know what I mean. Just a nice, ordinary family.
Oh, I don't think there's nothing wrong with being ordinary.
No, no.
All for it.
Yeah.
Good on him. Oh, well, Sir David.
I hope...
One day.
I hope he gets the knighthood.
Well, it's nice
as soon as possible.
And it's actually, if you haven't seen the picture, I know we've been showing it on screen, but if you're on the radio and things, have a look, because it's just a really nice picture of the King and David just smiling, having a bit of a giggle.
In front of the front door, apparently, of Highgrove.
Oh, is that where it is?
Yeah.
But it's a very relaxed picture. It's not posed. It's just...
No.
David's got all his tattoos out. The King doesn't seem to mind. Oh, that's just nice. I like it.
Yeah. And
anyway,
the King looks well. And if it was just taken only a month ago, he looks well in it and smiling from ear to ear, so that's good.
Really good.
Must be good news.
All right. Don't go anywhere.
Look.
Oh, it's great. We're going to have Ada McGee here with all your sports news in just a moment.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel. This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
And a broadcaster. Well, yes, you are a broadcaster, but I've never actually called it you that before.
In the loosest of terms.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been called a lot of things, but I could be anyone anyone wants me to be. Don't I? But look, Champions League. Real Madrid pulled it out of the bag again. 15 titles now they have to their name. Their coach by himself has 5. They just seem to get the job done. They were the inferior side last night for most of it, Stephen. But once it got to an hour, Borussia Dortmund didn't take their chances, which you have to do at any level of elite sport. If you don't take your chances, there's only one end result, especially against a side with the pedigree of Real Madrid.
Do you think the pitch invasions might have rattled them?
In this occasion, it wasn't long enough, although it was right at the start. It was 1 minute, I think it was, or a minute and a half to remove the intruders. I suppose it can unsettle players. You're not expecting an intruder. I mean, we saw in tennis in '93 with Sellers. I mean, I think that will happen again sometime. I think that's how serious the situation is.
Well, I think it's disgusting that anyone could get that close to them.
Yes, and the players were unnerved by it. We didn't see, and the feed that I saw, they pulled away from it. So you couldn't see them coming in, but there were 53 arrests last night. Not a good look in the context of the fact that Sadiq Khan has said, we want WrestleMania in London, we want the Super Bowl in London. If they see the security arrangements, they're going to be going somewhere else. There's plenty of options around the world, I'll tell you, that would welcome those events. But no, just on the pitch, another title for Real Madrid. Borussia Dortmund didn't take their chances. Great for Jude Bellingham as well, set up the second goal. Euros on the horizon, he's 20 years old, and he's from Stourbridge in Birmingham. He's like, how did I get here? And he's saying, I couldn't have dreamt it better. I want to be an example to my son. He's going to be a leading light for England going into that tournament where they were expected to do something, and Gareth Southgate will be delighted that he's going in there with a Champions League medal in the palm of his hand.
Yeah. Queensberry rules.
It does rule.
That's a pun.
Brilliant.
That could be a headline.
Yeah, no, you're doing my job for me.
Thank you. I'm going
to get kicked out of this.
The 5 versus 5 boxing yesterday, and it was the Queensberry team, which is Frank Warren.
Frank Warren said before all the bounty yesterday, he's bound to say, but he thought, I could see a whitewash here. I could see 5 wins out of 5, and I thought, no chance, because they're both equal stables, really. They're rivals. I mean, Frank Warren's 72, and his real adversary was Eddie's dad, Barry, who was involved in multiple different sports. But yeah, look, I mean, Daniel Dubois, that was a big surprise, him disposing of Filip Hrgovic in the 8th round. That was a stoppage. That sets him up to fight Anthony Joshua later in the year, I would imagine, because he's the mandatory challenge to Alexander Usyk, but Usyk is going to give up his title, or one of the titles he won against Fury, because he's going to take on the rematch against Fury. So it's a little bit of a tangled web, but don't be surprised if we see Daniel Dubois up against Anthony Joshua in September. It was a great night. I mean, great story with Deontay Wilder. I think we might have seen the last of Deontay Wilder, the Alabama Slammer. The Alabama Slammer who doesn't actually connect with anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, how many fights do you need? You've had 3 against Fury. You scrape a draw in one of them. You lose against Joseph Parker, and he was comprehensively beaten last night by Zhilei Zhang, who a year ago you'd said was probably a journeyman. But he was giving away 5 stone in weight as well. This is the thing with heavyweight. I mean, if you're a middleweight, there's quite a narrow band, so there aren't really mismatches. But in heavyweight, it's anything above a certain weight. So you go in there at your own risk. And he looked underweight, he looked underpowered. And I think that might be the end of him. But an interesting format. You know, we see with darts, we see with other sports, we see different competitions, we see knockout, we see leagues, we see all round robin, whatever. We've only really ever seen in boxing match equals victory equals belt. Last night, it was a whole card, and the punters locally would have been entertained by that. And the scheduling was right, Anne, as well. They knew the Champions League final. They didn't want to compete against that. They knew the Champions League final was going to be on 8 o'clock British time, and so they had the sense to make the big events scheduled sometimes after that. It wasn't great for my sleep pattern, I must admit, but it's the things you do for your country, and it's the things you do for GB.
Is that why Novak Djokovic had to wait almost 24 hours to play his game? Well,
that was rain. That was actually rain. But yeah, I've got the actual start time. I mean, I find it ridiculous. I mean, 10:37. He was on court.
So he'd been waiting all day.
Yeah, and I imagine. You know what the organisers were thinking. I mean, he was up against the 30th seed, but Lorenzo Musetti. But I think they thought, well, he'll dispose of him in 3 sets. It's not going to take long. But he took him right to the wire. 4 hours and 29 minutes.
So they finished at what time?
3:07 a.m. You can't do that at Wimbledon because of the bylaws.
Why can't they just put it onto the next?
Well, I don't know. There must be. I think because of I think there's been rain throughout the week, so they're already playing catch up. I remember back in 1991 at Wimbledon, they actually decided the rain was so disruptive that they made instead of being best of 5 sets rather, they made the first week best of 3 sets. So that's the solution going forward. It can't be good for players. It's not the first time it happened, but 3:07 a.m. You can't rely on Djokovic just swatting away opponents because people want to beat him. He's there as a target.
And I presume they don't have any covers at the Roland Garros.
They do have cover. They do have covers, but it's how quickly you can get them across. And even
but covers you can play under. I meant.
Oh no, they don't have any covers. They are building those. I went there myself, and I've seen the plans actually. But it's also how the rain affects the clay.
As
well, because it can expand. Anyone who had a red gra at school. I went to a poor school, but we still had that facility of a red gra. But the clay expands with water, as anyone who's done pottery would know. So
true.
So I'll give you everything. I'll give you everything in these updates, don't I?
You do. Yeah, go on, whip us up a cup, would you?
Yeah, all right. Well.
Oh dear, Ages, brilliant stuff.
Good to see you this weekend, back.
Broadcaster and potter.
Yeah, potter. Yeah.
I'd love to do a bit of pottery.
Yes, me too.
I have no idea how you really do it.
With the wheel.
Oh yeah.
Oh, get one in the studio. We can both learn.
To mould me in their time, don't we?
No, I'd love.
I would love to have a go with that too.
Looks a lot of fun.
Should we see if we can persuade some?
Have you watched the Great British Throwdown?
Yeah.
You call it,
yeah.
Very good.
Have you watched Ghost?
Oh no, I've never seen Ghost.
It was a very famous pottery scene in Ghost.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Yes. Andy Jones and Suzanne Evans will take us through the papers. That's next.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in, it's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not
Wow.
Full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Hans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know, a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
All right, let's see what's in the papers this morning with the writer and journalist Andy Jones and political consultant Suzanne Evans. Good morning to you both. Let's have a bit of politics, should we, from the Sunday Telegraph, Andy?
Yeah, so Labour trying to demonstrate that they're very much tough on unemployment and tough on migration today. Unemployed Britons will be trained to do jobs normally taken by overseas workers. This is from Yvette Cooper, Shadow Home Secretary. She's saying that she's going to take the millions of unemployed and retrain them to do jobs in sectors which are typically dominated by migrant workers like care, health, construction and engineering.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I have to say this is absolute common sense, isn't it? We should be... Why are we shipping people over to do jobs when we've got unemployed people over here?
It's totally common sense, but what gets me is that other parties, such as UKIP, have campaigned on this and they've been shouted down as racist. And yet here we are, Labour coming out with the same policy. Although, of course, many years ago, I'm old enough to remember that even Gordon Brown talked about British jobs for British workers. But then the Labour Party changed. But it's also interesting because, yes, Labour are also promising to cut migration. Now, that's not difficult, given that it's, 685,000 this year, 750,000 last year. But again, how are they going to do that? It seems at odds with their other stated policies, as having, for instance, opening the door to Palestinian refugees, also a Lib Dem policy, SNP, Greens, all supporting that. So you've got this one hand that's saying we're going to cut migration. I don't see any plan from Labour as to how they're actually going to do it.
Quite, and also having this plan and then putting it into action is a completely different thing. There's however many million off work for mental health reasons. I think 5% of under 30s are off work with mental health reasons. If you're not mentally able or physically able to do a job in an office, for instance, you're not going to suddenly be able to work on a construction site, are you? Or care work either, which is incredibly manually difficult work, very strenuous work, a lot of care jobs, and engineering requires huge amounts of skill. So this idea of, yes, we're talking constantly about we need more homes in this country, and those are often built by migrants, but the idea that you can suddenly just overnight become one of these skilled professionals.
I'll tell you what...
Soundbite policy, mate. Soundbite policy.
I don't quite understand how it works, but I did listen to an immigration expert when they look at the big figures, the people who do the modelling, as they call it.
Yeah.
And saying when it gets up to the levels it's been, and a lot of that is linked to students and people coming in. It says it will naturally drop. So and this was about 12 months ago, and they're saying give it another 18 months and it will sort of halve down to 400, 300,000.
Interesting. It's a bit like inflation, isn't it? You know,
a
inflation was
drop.
always going to be a natural fall, and yet, of course, the government's taking the credit.
Yeah.
So maybe this will be the same thing.
Yeah, could well be.
Yeah, and in an interview with The Sun on Sunday, Keir Starmer has said, read my lips, we're going to be tough on immigration. So this is going to be a football that he's going to kick around over.
It'll be a first for Labour. Mind you, it'll be a first for the Tories as well, if they promise it too, given recent events.
Should we talk about Stormy Daniels?
We talk about Stormy Daniels. So Stormy Daniels is in lots of papers this morning, but particularly on the front page of the Mirror, basically saying, lock him up. She wants Trump jailed. She's clearly out for revenge, although personally I'm struggling to find out what kind of revenge she wants, because she had a perfectly consensual. I've invented a new, very interesting word, actually.
What's she complaining about?
Well, exactly. She's made tons of money out of this. She's got her man. She's world famous now. I was say making a lot of money out of it. The charges against Trump, the prosecution, he should not be going to jail for those offences. Whether you love him or hate him, and I'm a kind of bit on the fence, he doesn't deserve jail time for this. And my worry is if he does go to jail, if he is put in jail, and people like Stormy Daniels are calling for that, there is going to be complete civil unrest in America, because it would be grotesquely unfair.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people have got confused. They think, they've assumed that the court case we saw in New York was about his relationship with her.
No, it wasn't.
But it wasn't.
No. Yes.
It was about the money that was in the end paid to her and where that money was claimed to have come from and how it was accounted.
It's an accountancy
It's actually nothing
isn't
to.
it?
It's nothing to do with the morality or immorality of his relationship with her.
No.
And as you say, it was consensual. So I can't understand why she's sort of turning around and saying he must be jailed.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, look, this is her industry now. He's talking about Donald Trump and condemning Donald Trump, and she has had an awful kickback from sort of Republican militants, like threats on her life and all of this sort of stuff.
I'm sorry, you've got threats on your life and you're worried. You don't speak to umpteen newspapers and put yourself out and say things that are even more inflammatory and likely to bring even more opprobrium on yourself, really, do you?
No, quite.
Pay you 100 grand.
Well, that's my point. It's all about the money for her now, isn't it?
This is her whole industry. Her whole industry now, throughout this
Yeah.
presidential election, will be talking about Trump, condemning Trump, etc.
Her Get Trump campaign.
All right, Andy, let's talk about this. I don't understand in the Daily Star Sunday. A survey, another survey, pointing out the bleeding obvious, which is we like to take our dogs to the pub.
Yeah, so 4 out of 5 owners admit taking their dog to the.
I don't know if I don't.
You did, but you don't make a fuss about it. Don't mention the word.
4 out of 5 dog owners take their dog to the pub. No shot there. But more than half say taking their dog to the pub gives them more confidence to talk than alcohol. So if you're single but have got a dog, taking your dog to the pub might introduce you to somebody.
Oh, absolutely.
Because people talk to the dog.
Yes.
People talk to the dog.
Yeah.
And then you become...
you become friendly with them,
here's Jack's owner, or here's Rover's owner, or whatever, and they don't know your name or anything about you. They like petting your dog. I must say, I like going to the pub more. I used to go to the pub to meet women, and now I just go to meet cuddly dogs and straight dogs.
Well, absolutely. One of my sons borrowed my dog, my little fluffy dog, looked after her for a week, and said, when I went to collect her back, he said, I'm not sure you want her back. She's a babe magnet.
Yeah, I know men who said that. I've heard exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to work the other way, though, I don't think. When I've taken dogs for a walk, I'm never approached by attractive men, so...
Really?
Just
yeah,
keep
maybe it's
walking
just
that
me.
dog.
It's just
No,
me. It's not the dog. It's just me.
Very glamorous
Maybe it's the fact that your dog is a Doberman.
No, it wasn't. I've got my lovely friend. She's got 2 miniature schnauzers. I look after them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, little fluffy ones. That's what you want.
Yeah, I don't know. I think,
Well, no, you've got a great big muscular dog.
Yeah, great big dog. He's great down the pub, though. He's a bit too friendly at the minute, but he's only a puppy.
Oh.
Only a puppy is about 6 foot tall.
He is massive.
What is he?
Rex is a Ridgeback.
Oh.
Fabulous. We're out of time. Here's the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we can expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, though there is some cloud across in the northwest. There should be a little bit of mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland, though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over western hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here. But elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy. A few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon, it should be largely dry. Just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later. And it will be brightening up across Scotland, and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
How does it work in your home then when you're discussing politics, especially with your young son, Nigel?
Well, I mean, we discuss politics rather than argue about it. Both of us are political professionals. We've been in the game a long time, so we understand that. So we're more keen on what is actually going on and how things are working out than clashing over opinions. Now, Claire is a Tory Brexiteer. I'm a Labour Remainer.
Do you think relationships like your own are going to become less and less common?
I think they are, and I think we can see that politics has become very divided, it's become very toxic, and we've lost that art of debating. I'm more than happy to speak to anybody on any subject to do with politics, because I think it's only healthy to listen to someone's opinion. You may not agree with it, you may think that they're ridiculous. However, I think it's really important that you hear those views, because if you only become encased in a bubble of your own opinion, you're never going to learn anything. And I think politics needs that. You need to be able to explore other sides of an argument. It also makes you better at arguing.
Yeah.
And Nigel and I constantly disagree on various bits and pieces, but you learn how to place your arguments so much better because you know what the other side are thinking. Now, if we had that across the country and across the House of Commons, we could have so much better debate and so many better different opinions coming through, and it would be a lot healthier.
and polite debate, which always strikes me about you two. You disagree on most things when it comes to politics, but you do so with so much humour and so much respect for one another.
Well, we find politics fun, and so when we bring politics into the home, we want to have fun with it too.
Britain's election channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of June. Today, the battle bus campaign gets underway as Rishi Sunak faces another poll blow. Sir Keir set to tackle the tricky problem of immigration.
It's 30 years since the RAF Chinook helicopter crash in the Mull of Kintyre. I'm sure you remember it. The families of the victims are still searching for answers about what actually happened.
So there is no doubt there was something wrong with the craft.
We'll continue our series of D-Day veterans stories as we run up to the 80th anniversary of the historic landings this week. Today, Will Hollis has been speaking to 98-year-old Alec Penstone.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in.
Well, there's going to be plenty of warm sunshine across the country today, though a little bit cloudier across the northwest with some rain and drizzle, and a bit cooler here too. So stay tuned for all your latest weather updates.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, we better crack on because it never stops for the politicians at the moment. They've got plenty to do, possibly a lot more to do for the Prime Minister because there's been more bad news for him. Labour's lead in the polls has grown to a new high, not seen since the days when Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
And today, the Prime Minister will pledge an extra £1 billion a year in a bid to increase the number of GP appointments in the UK.
Well, Keir Starmer is tackling immigration, net migration at least, as he announces plans to cut it. But he's not giving us any figures as to how much. Also, there are questions over Labour apparently offering peerages to encourage MPs not to stand again.
So it goes on. Joining us now, ahead of her show at 9:30 this morning, is Camila Tominey in Westminster. Good morning, Camilla. Gosh, there's such a lot to cover now, isn't there? Who have you got on and what are you going to be talking about?
Good morning. Well, yes, Stephen there mentioned that no figures had been given by Keir Starmer as he made that pledge in The Sun on Sunday. Read my lips, I will bring immigration down. I'll be speaking to Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and asking her for some numbers. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? As July the 4th fast approaches, we have all of these promises from all the different parties. So apparently, guys, on July the 5th, you know, there will be no more boats crossing the channel. Immigration will come down, but nobody's actually nailing their colours to the mast and giving us a cap or any numbers. You'll both know, and as will people watching and listening to this, that under the Tories, we've had successive promises of tens of thousands of migrants, but they've gone up to the hundreds of thousands. So we'll be grilling Yvette Cooper about that. Also speaking to her about Labour's plan to put VAT on private schools. You'll see that's also dominated the Sunday papers. Stories of a second school, which has a third of pupils with special educational needs, having to close down. According to the Sunday Telegraph, there's now a union revolt against the plan. So I'll be putting all of that to Cooper. And then you've touched on this, I know, again this morning. I'll be speaking to Victoria Atkins about the Tories' plans for healthcare. We know those NHS waiting lists have gone up. We've had Wes Streeting in the week for Labour. This is the man who wants to be the next health secretary, sort of pledging to bring down those waits considerably by 2029. I'll be asking Victoria Atkins, can she match those? She's come out with a new pharmacy plan, but we've also got stories emerging this morning of a shortage in drugs and medicines. So how is she going to woe those two things up? Because the pharmacists themselves are saying they don't have these medications to offer the public. And also, when it comes to both sides pledging all of these GP and other doctors and nurses appointments, the big question is, how's it going to be funded? How are you going to be able to afford overtime? In Labour's case, they want 40,000 more appointments a week. Well, that's surely going to cost billions. Billions, arguably, that the country doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite intrigued by the, as you said, the idea that the Conservatives say they'll free up appointments by shoving more and more things over to the pharmacists. Well, what about the pharmacy contracts, which they were saying, you know, 18 months ago weren't fit for purpose and didn't have enough money and they were going to have to shut down?
It's strange, Stephen, because under Theresa May there was this plan, ludicrous plan. I remember we campaigned against it on the Sunday Express when I worked there, to close down community pharmacies. Now the Tories have reversed that pledge and say they want more community pharmacies. But you make a good point. The pharmacists themselves and the National Pharmacy Association says this is all well and good. And let's be honest, there's something sensible about the idea of having a pharmacist triage, particularly minor cases. You know, you don't need to go to a GP surgery, for instance, if you need creams for itches and bites. There's a consulting room in most pharmacies and the pharmacist can see you privately if you've got concerns that just need medication. So we think this is a good idea, but as you say, the funding hasn't been there for decades.
And we're also told all the time, aren't we, there is just a general shortage of GPs. So I'm not sure how you bring up the number of appointments without actually needing more GPs anyway.
Well, this is something as well to put to Yvette Cooper, because Wes Streeting's talking about these extra appointments, but it was the Labour government that negotiated the GP contract, which effectively allowed GPs to work fewer hours for more money. We've also got the whole issue of the strikes going on. Don't forget that either, Anne and Steve, this idea that the junior doctors are now going to go on strike for another 4 to 5 days ahead of July the 4th. Conservatives are arguing that that's politically motivated. Junior doctors and Labour are saying, well, you haven't been at the negotiating table. You've basically just push this into the future and it's for the next government to sort it out, regardless of whether that government's blue or red.
Yeah. Can we also throw in the mix, I know people are probably fed up of hearing from Andrew Pearce, because he's never off our screens, God love him, but he's talking to you about his book, and actually we chatted to him about his book on Breakfast a couple of weeks ago, and it's just the most remarkable story.
Precisely. I mean, we see, don't we, on the evening shows, some of these families reunited programmes, and it's all very emotional, and people find their long-lost parents, and it's a wonderful reunion. It wasn't like this for Piercy. You know, he did find Margaret, his birth mother, and it didn't quite go to plan. And I think the extraordinary story of him discovering, you know, his early life, the fact that he was in this children's home until the age of 3, and then tracing his birth family and the effect that's had on his life, but also his own adoptive parents, his parents, as far as he's concerned, reaction to that, I think is a really moving story. So, yeah, we're used to seeing Andrew sort of joshing over politics and other issues, but this is a very, very personal tale that he's come into the studio to tell. I might also, by the way, ask him a little bit about the election campaign. I mean, you'd expect me to, right?
Yes.
And we're going to cover the Lib Dems too. Although they haven't put someone up, they're going to give us Norman Baker, a former Lib Dem MP, to talk about whether Ed Davey is making a mockery of their campaign.
Yeah.
Yes, we've been wondering that too.
Yeah, it's a fair question. Lovely, Camilla. We'll see you later on. Thanks very much indeed.
OK, now, a very interesting battleground in the next few weeks is Scotland. I mean, all sorts of people are vying for more seats there, and things could change quite fundamentally.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on the SNP, isn't there, over in this election?
Well, they haven't had a good year, no matter how you put it.
Well, of course, they're officially launching their campaign today. Tony Maguire is our Scotland reporter. Morning, Tony. I mean, I know John Swinney, the now First Minister and leader of the SNP, is saying, you know, they're in it to win it, but they have got a battle on their hands, actually, haven't they?
Yes, good morning. That is pretty much exactly what I put to the First Minister yesterday. I mean, he's been clear that one of the SNP's top priorities this election is to boot every Tory seat out of Scotland. And yet, it would seem, based on the polls, that their greatest contenders are Labour. So I asked him, you know, was he not concerned that he was fighting a battle on two fronts? But, you know, he came back with that answer, we're in it to win it. And indeed, today, at the launch of their campaign event, he's expected to tell activists that, you know, he's been crystal clear in his first 3 weeks on the job. Let's not forget that was when he took over from Humza Yousaf. But he's been directly attacking the priorities of the people of Scotland. And, you know, to his credit, there's not been a lot of talk of independence. I think that message that the public has far greater concerns, and even for the pro-independence supporters, you know, that's a concern much, much further down the list. I think John Curtis actually pointed out that independence supporters in Scotland, around 2/3 of them aren't expected to vote for the SNP. Their votes will potentially go to Labour. Now, that tells you that actually their priority is to indeed get the Conservative Party out of Westminster and install a Labour government. But certainly today we're hopefully going to hear a little bit more, what we call it, meat on the bone, because, you know, we've had these really strong campaign messages holding Labour to account, kick the Tories out of Scotland. But we're not likely to hear much in the way of policies because, of course, the SNP will never form a government unless they're invited to do so. But we're hopefully going to hear some pledges about how they plan to approach their time in Westminster over the next 5 years. And that in itself, I think, will be quite interesting, because let's not forget that all this time the SNP, well, they're still holding government up here in Edinburgh.
OK, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. We'll catch you a little bit later on. In the meantime, let's talk to our political correspondent.
I'm so sorry.
I know you're struggling today. Catherine Forster, who's here, fresh from a battle boss, no less.
Oh, not very fresh.
Not very fresh, no. What do you make of what you've seen so far? Because it's all well and good what we're told in terms of policy, but it's what you actually get from the sort of backstage sense of how these things are going.
Well, last week I spent 2 days with Labour and 2 days with the Conservatives. In the case of Labour, they're having these incredibly slick, tightly organised events. The one the other day in Wales, the numbers were so tight, couldn't even take my camera person or producer in. It was literally just me. Lots of his top team around him. We saw the battle bus yesterday with Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves as well, but very tightly controlled and orchestrated. They're playing a very, very safe game in that, you know, this announcement about immigration is one of the first new things we've heard from Labour, because they have felt that they don't really need to do too much. They don't want to give the Conservatives any target, so they're trying to sort of play it as safe as possible. With the Conservatives, totally different approach. Of course, they've got nothing to lose really at this point. They're so far behind, so they're coming up with all these new policy ideas. They feel they've got the momentum. They feel they've got the enthusiasm. Rishi Sunak's team believe that he's very good in small groups, out and about talking to voters, and we see that a lot. But, you know, they will be concerned. They say, obviously, the only poll that matters is the general election. But the polls do not appear to be shifting, despite this energy, this momentum that they feel they've got, despite all these announcements. These polls, you know, that MRP poll that had them down at potentially 70 seats, and the polls published later today, it does feel at the moment like people have stopped listening to the Conservative Party. And going around the country, a lot of people pretty much stopped listening to all of them.
You see, what I'm intrigued about is the TV debate coming up this week, because normally it's, I mean, these all have to be agreed. They're not given that it's going to happen, and it's normally the incumbent who is more reluctant to do it. This time round, it's Rishi Sunak's chomping at the bit to get on camera.
Yeah, it's completely the opposite, because at the moment the expectation is that Sir Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister with a Labour majority, however hefty or not. So Labour have agreed to 2 debates only, whereas Rishi Sunak would be very happy to do many, many debates. They feel that he's very good in that sort of setting. We will find out on Tuesday, and I think that, you know, a lot of this stuff is lost to people. They're simply getting on with their lives. But the TV debates are a moment that a lot of people will tune in and possibly often for the first time sit down and watch them. So how they perform could change things slightly. The Conservatives will be hoping so. So all eyes on Tuesday. Rishi Sunak today is in London preparing for Tuesday. Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, as he has with many leaders before, will be playing Sir Keir Starmer. They'll be role-playing and prepping for this. It's a big moment for them on Tuesday.
I must say, at the moment, even though the polls are terrible for him, Rishi Sunak is very bouncy, isn't he?
He's very bouncy, and I'm a bit like a broken record, but I've been with him a lot over the last month, first in Berlin and in Warsaw and in Vienna and now. And on every occasion, what has struck me and surprised me is how energetic and upbeat he seems, given that, I mean, behind the scenes, they must be very, very worried, surely, but there is no outward sign of that.
So what do we then make of how Keir Starmer is? He's not as bouncy in a sense, but he does seem to do everything with Ange by his side, and I mean, clearly that's tactical, isn't it?
Yes, and of course, now that Angela Rayner has been cleared from the council house, thing that went on and on and on, we're going to see more of her. Now, obviously, we had the bad press, if you like, over Diana, but I don't think that was well handled, and then Angela Rayner took her own line, so that's difficult. Doesn't appear to have cut through in the polls. But yes, I think we'll see Keir Starmer with Rachel Reeves, with Angela Rayner. The other day in Wales, he had David Lammy there as well. I think what's noticeable with the Conservatives, at the moment, we are just seeing Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak on a farm, Rishi Sunak on a train, Rishi Sunak with the bus. Where are all the rest of the cabinet? And, of course, according to the poll, there may not be that many of the cabinet.
Well, no, so many of them may lose their seats.
Many of them may lose their seats, and I suspect at the moment many of the cabinet are just trying to shore up their own constituencies. Interesting, former Prime Minister Liz Truss, according to that MRP poll, it's marginal, and of course it's just a poll, she's got a super safe seat, but they're saying on the MRP poll that she also could lose it. So it'll be very interesting what happens to the Conservative Party after. But of course, the election's 4.5 weeks away, and look at what happened to Theresa May. She thought she was going to get a big majority. Things can change, but I mean, yeah.
OK.
It could.
Thanks very much indeed. I know, which is why I think it's an interesting election. I think it's quite an interesting election this year. But anyway, we shall see. Thank you. See you later. Get some sleep.
Yeah, anything could happen. Now, it's officially summer. 2 days in. Have you felt it? We've got a brand new summer giveaway for you. It's £15,000 in cash, and that should really help you have a nice summer. There's going to be an iPhone, some AirPods, and £500 as well to spend, apparently, at the UK attraction of your choice. You can't win it if you're not in it, so here's what you need to know.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck to you. Now, coming up ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we're hearing the story of one man who risked his life for our freedom.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is about the Biden administration kind of resisting calls from Harry's lawyers whether or not this ongoing thing about releasing his visa records over the alleged, in Spare, he admitted to taking, remember his memoir Spare? He admitted to taking cocaine, marijuana and magic mushrooms. And a lot of people are saying, was he honest and truthful in his application, in his visa application? You have to say, have you taken drugs? He said no, and then in Spare he said yes. So I think this is absolutely fascinating. They're saying they can't release these records because there is a stigma attached to law enforcement records. Yes, there's a stigma attached to that, but then don't say... everybody else, if you write yes on a visa application, you will be chucked out of the United States. You will be denied entry. So I think this is fascinating that on this issue of whether there is a stigma for Harry or not, he can have his law enforcement records not released into the public domain.
The bottom line is, do we want him back?
So what's interesting is it seems to be becoming a political dividing line in the States because Biden is the administration trying to do Harry a favour by keeping them under wraps, but Trump has promised that he will, the file will be made public if he wins again.
Trump's been very strong on this. He said, if Harry lied, then he's out.
The one thing about America is their politicians make ours look sane. Which is saying something.
I'm slightly confused about this whole story because, OK, sure, Prince Harry has said this. How many pop stars, rock stars, movie stars, like every
the difference is, well, I don't think it's just a British. I think millions of Brits, to be fair to them, lie on the form every year. Millions of people from around the world lie on the form every year. Not, of course,
I'm not going to name any pop star specifically, but I would be mightily surprised if any hadn't indulged in what...
Yes, but of course they haven't given written evidence in their biography that they have, and that's the difference.
Britain's election channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
And that election, of course, July 4th. But right now, let's think about June 6th. Because ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we're sharing with you the stories of some of the men who risked their lives for our freedom. So we're going to introduce you today to 98-year-old Alec Penstone. Now, he joined the Royal Navy in 1943, and he trained as a submarine detector.
Well, Will Hollis spoke with Alec at the Union Jack Club in London.
Well, I'm amazed at one thing, that I'm still here, because I certainly didn't expect to be here at my time of life. My life was going to be short, but not very sweet.
Alec Penstone joined the Royal Navy in 1943. The 98-year-old served on the escort aircraft carrier HMS Campania, running supplies to Britain's allies in the Soviet Union. The white beret he wears highlights his role in the Arctic. He spent D-Day 3 decks down, listening for the enemy.
My role was a submarine detector, protecting the fleet going across to Normandy from the attack by U-boats. So therefore the U-boat pens were round at Brest. So I did not land on anywhere. I was just the cover force to protect the invasion fleet going over. Because if they'd have come out and pressed in the numbers that they had, they would have decimated the whole idea of Normandy landings. As it was quite a near thing at sometimes. They had to come out just below periscope depth where we used to wait for them. We certainly managed to stop them coming out, but unfortunately one managed to get through from the Arctic way and torpedoed one of the ships there with a tremendous loss of life.
80 years on, Alec remembers the sense of duty.
I'm proud of being able to do that rather than sit back and let somebody else do it.
He defended Britain when all seemed lost.
After Dunkirk, when we stood alone with nobody to help us except our own selves there, we realised we were in a very precarious position. We thought we were doomed. I mean, we were digging holes in the ground to hide in.
It's a long, long waiting Tipperary.
We're still around. England or Britain still carries on.
Will Hollis, GB News.
God bless him.
Yeah. Thank you for your service, as they say.
Oh, yeah, quite right too. Right, that is it from us, but don't go anywhere. Camila Tominey's here in a couple of minutes.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, it's been a fine start to the weekend and we can expect a largely dry Sunday with some sunny spells, though there is some cloud across in the northwest. There should be a little bit of mist and fog to start on Sunday, but generally clearing, leaving a pleasant and dry afternoon. It will be cloudier in the northwest of Scotland, though, with some spots of rain and drizzle by the time we get to the afternoon. And it's here where we start to see those temperatures struggle a little bit under those cloudier skies. But elsewhere, it's going to be a lovely warm day, particularly across the east coast where it was a little bit cooler here yesterday. So through the course of the evening, we will continue to see that rain and drizzle spread its way eastwards across parts of Scotland, turning a little bit heavier here at times as well, particularly as it pushes up over Western Hills. So a largely cloudy evening with rain and drizzle, cloudier across Northern Ireland too, still with some rain and drizzle here. But elsewhere across northeastern parts of England, central and southern England too, it should be largely dry with plenty of late evening sunshine. So through the course of the night then, we'll continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards across the country, and we'll start to see a feed of cloud in from the north, staying largely clear for most of the night across the south, where it'll be a little bit cooler here, particularly in those rural spots. But overall, a cloudy night on offer, which means it's generally going to be quite mild to start the new working week. So to start on Monday then, fairly mild and quite cloudy. A few brighter spells to start across the south, but it will be clouding over later. We will continue to see this rain and drizzle move its way southeastwards, but by the time we reach the afternoon, it should be largely dry. Just a cloudier day overall, perhaps the odd shower down across the southeast later. And it will be brightening up across Scotland, and we will start to see some sunshine break through that cloud. So a little bit warmer here, but overall a cooler day, particularly under cloudier skies. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages.